I think it's this administration. Congress has sanctions that are ready to roll. There's actually a package that's been on the president's desk for 3 weeks to impose additional sanctions on Russia. He won't sign it.
Mr. Putin.
That will apply additional pressure. How much they'll hinder is a question. The why, I mean, the argument that the president is making is that additional sanctions are unhelpful to the negotiations with Russia. And so that is the argument. Anytime President Putin looks as if he, is playing ball, it pushes off any sort of need for pressure. And the president seems to believe that argument.
Is there any leverage that the U.S. or the Europeans really have against Putin? Because it just feels like if we just look back at history over the last 100 years, these Russians they have some staying power.
They can, but you can lower the price of the oil price cap, which has been at $60 for the last few years. Oil's trading at, what, 65 a barrel? So you can begin to reduce the revenue that Russia is generating from oil. You can go after more third country actors. But we've yet to really see the U.S. do anything publicly.
I mean, I don't have the romantic life of Dan Tannenbaum. I mean, he doesn't have the Oliver and Wyman Gulfstream because Hugh von Steenis has it most of the time. But
he shares.
So what we're going to do right now, we are continuing the dialogue on Capitol Hill. I'm more interested in Dan Tannenbaum, but let's go to the President of the United States.
And Mike is doing a phenomenal job as Speaker. He's going to be there a long time. And we have a man in the Senate, our leader, Thune. Mr. Thune is doing a great job. I've gotten to like him a lot, and he's doing a fantastic job. Between the two guys, very different personalities, actually, in certain ways, but they are doing a fantastic job. I don't think the Republican Party has ever been so unified. It's become a much bigger party. We're winning the labor vote. We won the Teamsters. We won votes that nobody, look how well we did with the automakers. And by the way, the president of the automakers is now my biggest fan. He said, "PJ tariffs, do you know how many auto plants are being built now in this country because of the tariffs? 3 just announced yesterday that they're building." There is a revolution going on, a positive one, in our country, and I love it. And we're doing really well.
And will the negotiations to stop, Mr. President? Do you want the negotiations to be over now?
Which negotiation?
Over this bill.
Oh yeah, well it's going to be. We're going to be putting it in soon, and I think we're going to have great support.
Are you going to
we are going to make a couple of tweaks. I mean, we don't want to benefit Democrat governors, although I would do that if it made it better, but they don't know what they're doing. We don't want to do any damage to the state. We want to help all the states, but we have governors that are from the Democrat Party. Let's say New York, Illinois, big ones, and let's say Gavin Newsom, who's done a horrible job in California. We want to benefit the company. We want to benefit Republicans because they are the ones that are going to make America great again. The Democrats are destroying our country, and you see that with the past administration, with an open borders policy that allowed 21 million people into our country, and many of those people are stone cold murderers, killers, and trouble. Yeah.
The President of the United States, standing next to him, Speaker Johnson, and other worthies who will be speaking to Republicans. And of course, the headlines that we've given you show a unified Trump stance here among acrimony. I saw, Paul, today that the New York Times had a beautiful subset of 5 tribes within the Republican Party.
Yep.
And I guess it's smart. Dan Tannenbaum, thank you so much for your patience here as we juggle 2 and 3 and 4 worldwide events. We are going to go to Doha now. Michelle Hussein is editor-at-large of Bloomberg News in London. She does the weekend, and she is definitive within the continent in the United Kingdom for her efforts at the BBC, winning all sorts of accolades of Pakistani parents in the United Kingdom. Here is Michelle Hussein in Doha in conversation with Elon Musk.
Because we have a lot to cover in the time we have. That will be all right? Okay. Yeah, well, let's start then with exactly the fact that you now have this combination of being a CEO and having a role as a government advisor. Tell me about your week. How does it work? What's the split of your time?
Well, I travel a lot. So I was in Silicon Valley yesterday, morning. I was in LA yesterday evening. I'm in Austin right now. I'll be in DC tomorrow. I'll be there, having dinner with the president tomorrow night, I believe. And then a whole bunch of cabinet secretary meetings, and then back to Silicon Valley on Thursday night.
But I mean, the balance of your time, is it, well, clearly it's a lot, but is it still the case, as you said a while ago, that it's about 1 to 2 days a week on your government work?
Yeah, that's correct.
And what does that mean for your corporate life? Because if we start with Tesla, the company has suffered in recent months what you've called blowback. So what is your plan for turning that around, the declining sales picture? And by what stage do you think you're going to be able to turn it around?
Oh, it's already turned around.
Give me some evidence for that. I've just been looking at the sales figures for Europe in April, which show very significant declines in the big markets.
Europe is our weakest market. We're strong everywhere else. So our sales are doing well at this point. We don't anticipate any meaningful sales shortfall, and obviously the stock market recognizes that, since we're now back over $1 trillion in market cap. So clearly the market is aware of the situation. So it's already turned around.
But sales still down compared to this time last year.
In Europe.
In Europe, okay. And
yes, but that's true of all manufacturers. There's no exceptions.
Does that mean that you're not going to be able? Does that mean?
European is quite weak.
Okay, but you would acknowledge, wouldn't you, that what you are facing? Okay, let's just take it as Europe. What you are facing is a significant problem. This Tesla was an incredibly aspirational brand. People identified with it. They saw it as being at the forefront of the climate crisis, and now people are driving around with stickers in their cars saying, "I bought this before we knew Elon was crazy."
And there are also people who are buying it because Elon's crazy, or however they may view it. So yes, we've lost some sales perhaps on the left, but we've gained them on the right. The sales numbers at this point are strong, and we see no problem with demand.
So what?
I mean, you can just look at the stock price. If you want the best inside information, the stock market analysts have that, and our stock wouldn't be trading near all-time highs if it was not. If things weren't in good shape. They're fine. Don't worry about it.
Okay. I was citing sales figures rather than share price. Well, tell me then how committed you are to Tesla. Do you see yourself, and are you committed to still being the chief executive of Tesla in 5 years' time?
Yes.
No doubt about that at all.
Well, no, I might die.
Okay, short of that.
I can't be CEO if I'm dead. So there's a slight amount of time.
Does that mean that the value of your pay doesn't have any bearing on your decision?
Well, that's not really a subject of discussion in this forum. I think obviously there should be compensation for, if something incredible is done, that compensation should match that something incredible was done. But I'm confident that whatever some activist posing as a judge in Delaware happens to do will not affect the future compensation.
This is the judge who twice struck down the $56 billion pay package that was awarded to you. I think the value on the current value of stock options. Yeah.
Not a judge. The activist who is cosplaying a judge in a Halloween costume.
Okay, that's your characterization. I think
yes.
On the current value of stock options, I think the actual
justice according to the law.
On the current value of stock options, I think the value of that pay package stands at about $100 billion. Are you saying you are relaxed about the value of your future pay package? Your decision to be committed to Tesla for the next 5 years, as long as you are still with us on this planet, is completely independent of pay?
No.
It's not independent. So pay is a relevant factor then to your commitment to Tesla.
It's sufficient voting control such that I cannot be ousted by activist investors is what matters to me. And I've said this publicly many times. But let's not have this whole thing be a discussion of my alleged pay. It's not a money thing. It's a reasonable control thing over the future of the company, especially if we're building millions, potentially billions of humanoid robots. I can't be sitting there and one day get tossed out by, for political reasons, by activists. That would be unacceptable. That's all that matters. Now let's move on.
Okay. Well, just one question.
Let's move on.
Well, one question before we move on to other companies, which is that I wonder if some of what has happened to Tesla in the last few months, did you take it personally?
Yes.
And did it make you regret any of, or think twice about your political endeavors? Because it is.
I did what needed to be done. The violent antibody reaction, and I'm not someone who's ever committed violence, and yet massive violence was committed against my companies. Massive violence was threatened against me. Who are these people? Why would they do that? How wrong can they be? They're on the wrong side of history, and that's an evil thing to do. To go and damage some poor innocent person's car, to threaten to kill me. What's wrong with these people? I've not harmed anyone. So something needs to be done about them. And a number of them are going to prison, and they deserve it. And more will.
You're referring to the attacks on Tesla showrooms, but I think
Well, it's showrooms and burning down cars is unacceptable.
Yeah.
Those people will go to prison, and the people that funded them and organized them will also go to prison. Don't worry.
But wouldn't you?
We're coming for you.
Wouldn't you? But wouldn't you acknowledge that some of the people who turned against Tesla in Europe were upset at your politics, and very few of them would have been violent in any way. They just objected to what they saw you say or do politically.
Well, it's certainly fine to object to political things, but it's not fine to resort to violence and hanging someone in effigy and death threats. That's obviously not okay. That's absurd. That is in no way justifiable at all, in any way, shape, or form. And some of the legacy media nonetheless have sought to justify it, which is unconscionable. Shame on them.
Let's talk about your other companies then in other business areas, SpaceX. I saw that you said in a speech at the West Point Military Academy recently that the future of warfare is AI and drones. And obviously defense is an increasingly booming sector with the state of the world at the moment. Do you see SpaceX moving into weaponized drones?
You certainly ask interesting questions that are impossible to answer. SpaceX is it's the space launch leader. So SpaceX doesn't do drones. SpaceX builds rockets, satellites, and internet terminals. So SpaceX has a very dominant position in space launch. So of the mass launch to orbit this year, SpaceX will probably do 90%. China will do the half of the remaining amount, so 5%, and the rest of the world, including the rest of the US, will do about 5%. So SpaceX will do about 10 times as much as the rest of the world combined, or 20 times as much as China, and China is doing actually a very impressive job. The reason for this is that we're putting into orbit the largest satellite constellation the world has ever seen by far. So I think at this point, about maybe approaching 80% of all active satellites in orbit are SpaceX. And they're providing high bandwidth global connectivity throughout the world. In fact, this connection is on a SpaceX connection. So I think this is a very good thing because it means that we can provide low-cost, high-bandwidth internet to parts of the world that don't have it or where it's very expensive. And I think the single biggest thing you can do to lift people out of poverty and help them is giving them an internet connection. Because once you have the internet connection, you can learn anything for free on the internet. And you can also sell your goods and services to the global market. Once you have knowledge by the internet and the ability to engage in commerce, that this is going to greatly improve quality of life for people throughout the world, and it has. And I'd just like to thank anyone in the audience who may have been helpful in, with Starlink and getting it to approved in their country. And I think it's doing a lot of good in the countries that have approved it, which is, I think at this point, 130 countries are very happy with it. I don't currently anticipate SpaceX getting into the weapons business. That's not an aspiration. We're frequently asked to do weapons programs, but we have thus far declined.
Do you envisage SpaceX or indeed Starlink as a separate entity publicly listing in the near future or at all?
It's possible that Starlink may go public at some point in the future.
And what would be the time frame?
Starlink.
What kind of time frame are you considering?
I'm in no rush. I'm in no rush to go public. Public is, I guess, a way to potentially make more money, but at the expense of a lot of public company overhead and inevitably a whole bunch of lawsuits, which are very annoying. So really, something needs to be done about the shareholder derivative lawsuits in the U.S. Because it allows plaintiffs' law firms who don't represent the shareholders to pretend that they represent the shareholders by getting a puppet plaintiff with a few shares to initiate a massive lawsuit against the company. And the irony being that, extreme irony, that even if the class they purport to represent were to vote that they don't want the lawsuit would still continue. So how can it be a class action representing a class if the class vote against it? And that's the bizarre situation we've got in the U.S. It's a dire need of reform. As anyone who's run a public company experienced this, it's an absurd situation that needs to change.
Well, do you think Donald Trump might change it? You've certainly got his ear. I imagine that you've put this to him. Is this something you're trying to change before any Starlink IPO?
Well, it would need a law to be passed. The trouble being that you need 60 Senate votes, and the Democrats will vote against it. The plaintiff's bar is, I believe, the second largest contributor to the Democratic Party. That's the issue. At the state level, this can be solved. And I should say, Texas recently passed a law which, at least the state level, made class action reasonable, because you have to get at least 1 in 33 shareholders to agree that they are part of a class of shareholders. 3%. This will be really help with frivolous lawsuits.
Elon Musk in conversation with Michelle Hussein. We are live from Doha, Qatar. Bloomberg Radio worldwide.
And in all our worlds in different ways. It's one of the big changes, the development of generative AI since you last spoke.
Hello, my name is DrPaulCottrell, and we're doing a live stream on Rumble and on YouTube and my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos. On YouTube, we have the market telemetry with the video that I'm doing, and on Rumble, you just have the live stream of myself and the monitors. But if you would prefer to see both of them at the same time or have that optionality, you can watch on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com, under broadcast live, and you can watch the telemetry of the market with the smaller screen or just the larger screen without the telemetry. It's up to you. So you have some optionality as we're doing this. Today, I'm not doing a simulcast on X Spaces. the setup is, I'm starting to get used to, so I don't want to add another complication to the setup to do the simulcast on X basis, but we will be in the near future. Thank you for joining. I greatly appreciate it. Please help support my work by making sure that you subscribe to all my channels. I have 4 channels on YouTube. I have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Please subscribe to all those channels. The links are in the description of this video and all my videos. And if you would like to help support my work, purchase the products that I have on my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, or donate. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee on my website, or you can be a paid member to Patreon. All these videos I put out are for free. I have thousands of videos for free. It's through the ones that purchase the products, donate, and are paid members to Patreon that help me to do this work. So I greatly appreciate your patronage, and pay attention to what I have to say about how to use these supplements that are on my store. And you're going to notice that you're slowing down the aging process, boosting up your immune system, getting homeostasis with your endocrine system, and your overall health and well-being will improve. So you can listen and learn and apply and get healthy. In addition, I tell you what's going on in the financial markets and how you could make money in it. So I'm telling you how to make money and how to get healthy. Where there are a lot of other podcasters, what they do, they're just telling you doom and gloom. If you just listen to me, you'll be fine. All right. With that said, the markets have opened up in New York. We are recording and doing the live streaming on May 20th. I will repost this live stream on the different channels for the ones that missed the live broadcast. So we're doing this live stream on May 20th. Markets in New York have already opened up. So let's take a look at what's going on in the markets. So the S&P 500 is trading at 5,945. VIX is trading at 18.09. Euro USD is trading at 1.12. Oil's trading at 61.72. BITO is trading at 22. That's the long ETF for Bitcoin. And USD Japanese yen is trading below 145. It's trading at 144.83. I would like to see yen above 145. Anything below 145, you're starting to see a little bit of stress. But we have a good VIX index, which is below 20. So it's at 18 right now. In terms of Gush, which is an ETF for oil exploration and producers, that's trading at 22.27. DRIP is the short for that. And that's trading at 10.31. And UCO, which is an ETF that has a decent correlation to the oil market, that's trading at 21.19. Natural gas is trading at 3.28. So natural gas is going up a little bit. A couple weeks ago, it was trading at 3.6. The Treasury, the 10-year Treasury price is going down, so yields are going up. And Bitcoin is trading at Bitcoin's trading below 105 right now. All right, so that's the take in the market. Now, I want to go over the resistance levels for the ones that don't know and the support levels. So the S&P 500 is trading at 5,944. We have a major resistance level at 6,000. The all-time high is about 6,130. The nearest support level is 5,750. The next support level, if that broke, if we had negative news because of the tax bill or the tariffs, we might break that 5,750 support level, and the next support level would be 5,500. There's a higher probability that we're going to be in a trading range between 6,000 and 5,750, 5,800, somewhere in there. But if we get good positive news from the tax bill moving through Congress and a de-escalation of the tariff war, then we are going to continually test that resistance level at 6,000 and break it. Most likely by July or through July, we'll actually have an all-time high on the S&P 500. As long as positive news is coming out from Washington. Oil, major supply. We had a little hiccup on Rumble. Sometimes Rumble feed dies out and I have to reboot it. In terms of oil support level is at 54. Major support level at 60, at the 61% retracement. That is calculated from the low from the COVID time period in oil all the way to the highest level that the futures market was trading at post-COVID. So that 61% retracement was tested when there was an oil sell-off a few weeks ago, a couple weeks ago. It held, so it's a major support level. That's at $54 a barrel for WTI. That happens to be at about the average for the trading range that was taking place pre-COVID. Now, a major resistance level is 65, and another major resistance level is at 68.50. Those are structural. Now, the 68.50 is structural. The 65 is more at the high end of the trading range that was pre-COVID. Now, what is interesting that I'm noticing with the oil market is that it's having a hard time. WTI is having a hard time getting above 63. So there is a little bit of a resistance level even at the 63 mark. Right now we're trading at 61.70, and purchasing oil at this level, it's probably actually a good idea. So BITO, which is an ETF for Bitcoin that I've been watching for a while, that's trading at 20.015, right? Right now, I'm noticing in the last several trading sessions that Bitcoin will go up in the Asian session and sell off in the European session and then try to recover in the US session. So there's a lot of undulation that's taking place. It's in the US session, it's having a hard time maintaining above 105. So, just keep that in mind at this moment in time. So they're made a support level at 2148 for BITO. And if that breaks, and let's say Bitcoin was selling off, the next major support level is 20 for BITO. Major resistance level, 22.5. And I am seeing that with the BITO that's tied to Bitcoin. So BITO is having a hard time staying above 22 and getting to that 22.5. We'll see. I suspect, though, that next week we'll potentially have Bitcoin starting to trade around the 107 mark and maintain that and not keep on going down to 104. But the overall average trend is that it's recovering. It's moving in an upward direction, but there is a lot of volatility with Bitcoin. All right, with that said, let's, before we go back to Bloomberg covering Musk, he's being interviewed at the Qatar Economic Forum. Please help support my work by going to my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great products that I have. I have a plethora of products that I use, and I tell you how to stack them so you can improve your health. And it's a win-win situation. You're improving your health, and you're helping the show for me to provide this content for free. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos. And get the structural nano silver soaps that I offer. I have peppermint. I also have lavender structural nano silver soaps. And I have lemongrass and charcoal tea tree soaps. Both of them are made from structural nano silver, very high quality soaps. Get a few soaps for your household. Help support the work that I do. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. I also have a great multivitamin, which is really important as a foundation for your health. It's easy to digest. So get this multivitamin, take it every day. It's easy to digest. And it has the multivitamins that you need for proper enzymatic activity. A lot of people don't know that multivitamins are cofactors, or many multivitamins are cofactors for enzymes. And you need those so you have the right shape for your enzyme to work properly in your cell. So you'll have better cellular processes. So start this as a foundation. Another great foundational supplement is to take the probiotics that I have. But this multivitamin is very important and you build off of it. And when you build off of it, you're building up a stack for your own health. So I'm going to tell you how to do this throughout the show. But if you stack these things, you're actually going to be able to target different systems like your cardiovascular system, your metabolism, your immune system, your endocrine system, brain function, gut health, all these different systems, bone structure, skin. So if you just pay attention to me, you can stack these in a customized way to meet your price points. Now, I take a lot of different supplements and have a holistic approach to slowing down the aging process that I've been working on for a long time. So if you take some of my experience and my knowledge about this, you'll be able to do something very similar to what I'm doing. You may want to do everything I'm doing. It's a little expensive if you do that. Most people can't afford what I'm doing. But the thing is that if you listen to me, you'll be able to target different systems at a reasonable price. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the multivitamin and start this as the foundation. All right. With that, let's go back to Bloomberg.
Journalist. So it's difficult when I'm conversing with someone who's trapped in the dialogue tree of a conventional journalist, because it's like talking to a computer. Doge is an advisory group. We are doing the best we can as an advisory group. The progress made thus far as an advisory group is excellent. I don't think any advisory group has done better in the history of advisory groups for the government. We do not make the laws, nor do we control the judiciary, nor do we control the executive branch. We are simply advisors. In that context, we're doing very well. Beyond that, we cannot take action beyond that because we are not some sort of imperial dictator of the government. There are 3 branches of government that are to some degree opposed to that level of cost savings. But nonetheless, let's not criticize whether there's 4 trillion, and instead look at the fact that 160 billion has been saved, and more will be saved too.
And as I said, I think everyone can agree that cutting waste and indeed fraud in any government and being responsible with taxpayers' money is a very good thing. So yes. I can see that you're proud of that work. I do want to ask you about US aid and the comments that Bill Gates made the other day, and I know that you called him. Yeah, he's a huge liar. I know you've said that already. That's I wondered.
Also,
and I'm just.
Who does Bill Gates think he is to make comments about the welfare of children, given that he frequented Jeffrey Epstein?
Okay, well, he said he regrets those, and he spent a lot of his own money on philanthropy around the world over the years. My question to you is: Have you looked at the data to check if you might be right that the cuts to USAID might cost millions of lives?
Yes. I'd like him to show us any evidence whatsoever that that is true. It's false. What we found with USAID cuts, and by the way, they haven't all been cut. The parts of USAID that were found to be even slightly useful were transferred to the State Department. So they've not been deleted, they've simply been transferred to the State Department. But many times over with USAID and other organizations, when they said, oh, well, this is going to help, children, or it's going to help some disease eradication or something like that. And then when we ask for any evidence whatsoever, I say, well, please connect us with this group of children so we can talk to them and understand more about their issue. We get nothing. They don't even try to come up with a show orphan, meaning like, it's sort of like, well, can we at least see a few kids? Like, where are they? If they're in trouble, we'd like to talk to them and talk to their caregivers. Okay, well, and then we get nothing as a response, because it's what we find is an enormous amount of fraud and graft.
Okay, let me put this example to you.
Very little of it actually gets to the kids, if anything at all.
Okay, let me put this example to you, because you grew up in South Africa, so you'll know the impact of HIV/AIDS well. And this is why I asked about the data. The US led on international efforts to combat HIV/AIDS treatment, prevention, and there's an initiative called PEPFAR, which is credited with saving 26 million lives in the last 20 years. It was part of the foreign aid freeze, then there was a limited waiver. Its services are disrupted, and UN aid says if permanently discontinued, there will be another 4 million AIDS-related deaths by 2029. So if you look at that example, which is backed up by data, in 2023, 630,000 people died of AIDS-related illnesses, then perhaps Bill Gates' figures are not wrong. Millions of lives could be lost.
First of all, the program, the AIDS medication program is continuing. So your fundamental premise is wrong. It is continuing. Now, do you have another example?
Not in its entirety.
That it is false.
Not in its entirety. The program, there's a limited waiver, and UNAIDS have said that not all of the services that were previously funded by USAID are continuing. So that's why I put that example to you.
Okay, well, which ones aren't being funded? I'll fix it right now.
Okay, well, actually, they're all on the UNAIDS website, so you'll be able to see them. But mostly they are to do with prevention, and for example, the rollout of a drug called lenacapavir, which was hailed as one of the biggest breakthroughs against AIDS for many years, which came out last year. So if you are, perhaps, I'm sure UNAIDS would be delighted if you're able to look at that again.
Yes, but well, if in fact this is true, which I doubt it is, then we'll fix it.
Okay, fine. So finally, your political influence. I wondered whether you have decided yet how much you're going to spend on the upcoming midterms. Is it you spent a lot more money on the last US election than you envisaged when you were speaking here 3 years ago? Are you going to continue to spend at that kind of level on future elections?
I think in terms of political spending, I'm going to do a lot less in the future.
And why is that?
I think I've done enough.
Is it because of blowback?
Well, if I see a reason to do political spending in the future, I will do it. I do not currently see a reason.
Okay. What about political influence beyond the US? How often do you speak to President Putin?
I don't speak to President Putin.
You've never spoken to President Putin?
I was on a video call with him once about 5 years ago.
That's the only.
Why would you think I speak to President Putin? Oh, you must. I get it. You believe the legacy.
Actually, I've heard you speak about it. For example, in your West Point speech, you said, "Oh, I challenged President Putin to was it an arm wrestle? And I know the Wall Street Journal has reported your reported conversations.
Oh, yes.
If you're saying they haven't happened other than once, I'll take that as read.
Is there a worse publication on the face of the earth than the Wall Street Journal? I wouldn't use that to line up my cage for parrot droppings. That newspaper is the worst newspaper in the world. If there's one newspaper that should be pro-capitalist, it's the one with Wall Street in the name. But it isn't. So I have the very lowest opinion of the Wall Street Journal. Absolute nonsense. And you clearly believe the tripe that you've read in those papers.
I read very widely, and I'm putting these questions to you so that you have an opportunity to respond to them, which you are, and for which we're all grateful to hear your responses. Yes. Okay, we are out of time. So
you mentioned to be challenging. I did so on the X platform. I challenged Vladimir Putin to single combat over the. I didn't talk to him. That was a post on the X platform.
Great. That's why I asked you, and you've clarified and explained. Thank you. That's why I was asking whether you have had reported conversations, and you said you haven't other than a video call. Okay.
Typical legacy media lies.
Okay. Listen, I actually thought I might give Grok the last word, because when I asked Grok what your hardest challenge is, it said the strain of managing multiple high-stake ventures amid financial, regulatory, and public relations crises. And I wondered whether you recognize that characterization and whether you do think that this is a pivotal year in your life.
Well, every year has been somewhat pivotal, and this one's no different. In terms of interesting things that hopefully are accomplished this year, the getting Starship to be fully reusable, so that we catch both the booster and the ship, which will be the first fully reusable orbital rocket ever in history, would be a profound breakthrough, as the essential breakthrough necessarily to make life multiplanetary and ultimately become a spacefaring civilization. We've got Neuralink, which is now helped 5 patients restore capability using the telepathy implant, where they're able to control the computer simply by thinking. We'll be doing our first patient to restore sight with our blind sight implant, which is either end of this year or early next. In fact, that first patient might be in UAE, since we have a relationship with UAE and the Cleveland clinic there. I think what's running on the AI front, we are close to what you might call AGI, or digital superintelligence. I think we are seeing an explosion in digital superintelligence here. And then we've got at Tesla, we'll be launching unsupervised autonomy, basically self-driving cars with no one in them, in Austin next month. So it's a big year for sure. Many other things in the works too.
Okay.
I'm a technologist first and foremost.
Elon Musk, thank you very much for joining us here at Qatar Economic Forum.
From Doha, Qatar, the Qatar Business Forum, our Michelle Hussein in conversation with Elon Musk. Markets have deteriorated a little bit here over the politics of the last hour. I was talking to Mr. Musk and hearing from Donald Trump as well. We're open for trading here with the Dow down 72 points, NASDAQ down 0.5%, the VIX 18.19. I mean, and again, Paul, one of the issues here is there's very little economic data this week.
Yeah, it is. You go, and there's just not a whole lot out there. Maybe that's okay. And we're pretty much through with earnings. It's conference season. We hear companies speaking at various conferences around. And
you like the conference season?
Conference season.
Let's go to CNN. Caitlin Collins asks Trump about meeting with Putin. This was published about 1 hour ago on YouTube.
Off from the pressure he had been putting on Russia to commit to a 30-day ceasefire with Ukraine, instead saying the negotiations must happen between those two countries directly. Here's what happened at the White House today. President Trump had a 2-hour phone call with Russian President Putin today, and though it didn't seem to yield any breakthroughs, he described it in positive terms on social media after that call happened, and also said that he now believes that any agreement that happens here will have to be negotiated between Russia and Ukraine. That comes just days after the president said that he thought before any real progress could happen, he would personally have to sit down with the Russian leader.
Would you have any questions?
Did you ask President Putin to meet with you?
About what?
About Ukraine.
Of course I did. I talked to him about it. I said, when are we going to end this, Vladimir? I've known him for a long time now. I said, when are we going to end this bloodshed, this bloodbath? It's a bloodbath. And I do believe he wants to end it. And I did say also, if I thought that you couldn't do it, I'd step away, because what are you going to do? We don't have boots on the ground. We wouldn't have boots on the ground. But we do have a big stake. And the financial amount that was put up is just crazy. It's crazy. This isn't for us. This is for somebody else.
The president told us that he believes Putin wants to bring this war to an end, despite how we saw Russia attacking Ukraine with one of the biggest drone strikes since the war started in 2022 over the weekend. And shortly after that call happened with Putin today, and after it ended, the president wrote this online in part saying, quote, Russia and Ukraine will immediately start negotiations toward a ceasefire, and more importantly, an end to the war. The conditions for that will be negotiated between the two parties, as it can only be. Now, that's notable, given it stands in stark contrast to what President Trump himself said about his own involvement just days ago.
Nothing's going to happen until Putin and I get together, okay?
Because I'm tired of having other people go and meet and everything else. I think we'll do it fast, too.
In the Oval Office, I asked President Trump directly about that shift. You said last week that you thought nothing was going to happen, no advances would be made until you and Putin got together. Do you still feel that way?
I think something's going to happen. It's a very big egos involved, I tell you. Big egos involved. But I think something's going to happen. And if it doesn't, I'd just back away, and they're going to have to keep going. Again, this was a European situation. It should have remained a European situation.
Now, one central question that has been posed to the president and to his top national security aides is whether or not the Russian leader is simply trying to buy himself time here, dragging out these negotiations when he has actually no real intention of coming to the table. Weeks ago, the president himself mused publicly about whether or not President Putin was simply, quote, tapping me along and has to be dealt with differently. I asked him about that aboard Air Force One last week in the Middle East. How are you feeling about how Putin is handling this? I know you had said a few weeks ago you thought maybe how Putin is handling this. You said a few weeks ago you thought maybe he was tapping you along.
I'll let you know in a few days.
Asked that question again today, the president said this.
It's a very bad thing that's happening over there. I think he wants to stop. But I could answer that question better in 2 weeks or 4 weeks from now. I hope the answer is that he wants to get it solved.
My source tonight is the Republican Senator Mike Rounds of South Dakota, and it's great to have you here, sir. Do you see the progress being made on the Russian side in getting towards a ceasefire that the president does here?
I think the president is right when he tries to find a path forward to find peace. Whether or not we have all the parties involved wanting peace right now is really questionable, because I think Mr. Putin has made it clear that he's going to delay this if at all possible, which is, not what the president wants to hear. Look, I really think the president wants to find a path forward to stop the bloodshed. I believe that firmly. I also think he's going to give Mr. Putin every opportunity to find a path forward. Personally, I don't think Mr. Putin has an interest in it, but I think the president is laying the groundwork so that when the time comes and he asks for particular economic sanctions and so forth, there is no question to Mr. Putin, except that it's his fault. He had the opportunity, he failed to respond, and the damage being done to his economy in the very near future will be devastating.
But you don't think Putin right now, from what you've seen, wants to end this war?
I don't think he does, but Let's give him the opportunity to reconsider, and let's make sure that he understands that this president is laying out a path forward that is giving him
We're Phoenix Energy, a family-owned oil company focused on unleashing American oil from North Dakota and Montana.
every chance to change things around. Look, we can't trust Mr. Putin. The only thing we can do is to make sure that we verify that if he does say he's going to agree to something, that it is verified and that we can count on it and actually track it. In the meantime, we have to assume that he's going to try to play this thing out. And then if he goes so far, there is an end to the rope. And at the end of that rope would be some of the most severe sanctions. I think we probably got well over 80 votes in the United States Senate right now to impose some of the most severe sanctions that have ever been laid on another country.
So you do think, as President Trump put it a few weeks ago, that Putin is tapping him along?
It's entirely possible. Look, I don't see a path forward where Mr. Putin can long-term win this. I just don't see that. But I think Mr. Putin probably wants, because he believes he's destined to recreate the Soviet Union once again. And somewhere along the line, this conflict is going to be such that the only way we find out whether or not Mr. Putin has any sense of the damage that can be done to Russia is to actually impose the kind of sanctions that would be devastating. And I believe that President Trump thinks that he can make a deal as Mr. Putin realizes that we are very, very serious, that this is not going to continue on. And that it doesn't just mean military actions. It means economic sanctions that would be damaging beyond anything they've ever seen in Russia before.
There have now been 3 phone calls between President Trump and President Putin since he took office the second term. You mentioned the sanctions. How much time do you want the White House to give Putin here before you believe it's time to implement those sanctions?
I'm ready anytime, because
you think they should go now?
Look, I would be more than willing to support sanctions at this time, but let's do it with our allies. Let's make sure that we've done everything possible to make it visible to the entire world that Mr. Putin is the bad guy. There's no question about it. Let's make certain that everybody understands that Ukraine is the country which has tried to come to the peace table and Russia has refused, so that the rest of the world understands that if they're helping Russia on this, they're going to be subject to the same types of sanctions as well. You start by making it very clear and you build your team together. We're seeing leadership right now by the president in doing this, and it's frustrating to the rest of us because we'd like to go right now. I mean, we're convinced. But the president wants to make sure he's got a whole team working with him on it. I'm not going to disagree as long as we finally get to the point where Ukraine can be saved.
Nick, good morning to you. Just how delicate is the situation for the Ukrainian president with these ongoing potential talks?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's important to point out that talks began on Friday at the suggestion of Vladimir Putin after he'd rebuffed a demand for a ceasefire nearly a week before that. And so the suggestion that we're into some sort of new phase here is disingenuous, really. This is an ongoing process, and it's one that the Kremlin is strictly timetabling. What was important about yesterday's phone call was that Trump had kind of heralded it as a potential breakthrough moment, hoping that some sort of ceasefire potentially could follow it, or at least progress towards maybe, like he suggested a matter of days earlier, a face-to-face meeting between himself and Vladimir Putin, and then maybe even between Zelensky and Putin. None of that happened at all. And instead, we had a pretty unmoved Vladimir Putin talking about the possibility of exchanging documents for a ceasefire, describing the call as positive, frank and constructive, but also harking back to one of his earliest talking points in this peace process about how the root causes of the conflict needed to be addressed. And that's ultimately code for the false Russian narrative that it was NATO expansion near its borders that provoked its unprovoked full-scale invasion nearly over 3 years ago now. And so the issue, I think, is the Kremlin showing it can maintain the same slow pace, the same dictation of what happens, who talks to who and when. But the bigger takeaway potentially from yesterday is how Donald Trump himself feels about it. His vice president, J.D. Vance, hinted that, you know, if they didn't see any progress, they might decide they didn't want to do it anymore. Ultimately, Trump seemed to echo that by suggesting, as you just heard him there, that if they didn't see kind of progress, they might have to back away and let them continue to kind of go at it. I paraphrase here. But ultimately, the United States pulling itself out of the diplomatic process here, dropping diplomatic pressure on Russia for a peace deal, and potentially reducing its commitment to assisting Ukraine. That's on track as it currently stands. When the Biden grants begin to run out later on this year, that is exactly what Russia wants. They want less United States involvement in this war, and they seem to be getting that through doing nothing. And so I think the lesson of the last 10 days is that if Trump is pushed by Putin or ignored by Putin, he loses interest in this topic. And now we have Europe, who've been clear they can't really maintain a ceasefire here or orderly peace without an American backstop, potentially talking about sanctions. They're not as effective as they could be without US support, if not particularly effective at all, and trying to maintain a sense of morale here in Ukraine, I think, where we've just seen months now of diplomacy yields almost nothing, apart from a very stark reminder that Vladimir Putin is in absolutely no rush, if not no desire at all, for a peace deal.
The fastest growing scam of.
All right, breaking news. UK Foreign Secretary will take, it looks like they're taking actions against Israel. I think UK suspends talks with Israel on new free trade agreement, as Foreign Secretary says its actions in Gaza are indefensible. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotics that I have. I have it in powdered form, which is the type that I take. It's just easier for me to take it during my lunch, or the veggie cap version. Both are very high quality probiotics. So either take the veggie cap or the powder, take it every day. And when you take a good probiotic, what's going to happen is you're going to reduce inflammation in your gut. That's going to help your immune system. It's going to help build that mucosal barrier in the inner lining of your gut. Your concentrations of IgA are going to increase. And you are going to be able to break up your food better and digest your food. So your metabolism is going to be better. Your energy absorption will be better. The communication between your gut and your liver will improve, and your gut and your brain will improve. What will happen is you'll be able to sleep better. You'll be less irritable. And you'll also notice that your skin improves. So a good gut biome targets multiple systems in your body. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the probiotics, either in the veggie cap form or in the powdered form. Take it every day. And when you do that, it's a great foundation to build off of and add other supplements that are on the store to customize your health protocol. But a multivitamin and a probiotic are two supplements that are major foundational pieces for proper health. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, use discount 5, and you get $5 off any order. All right, let's listen in to what's going on in London.
The F-35s, and can I make absolutely clear to her, our decision to suspend arms sales that could be used in Gaza is a serious one, and we are absolutely content that we are meeting all obligations that I set out back in September.
Presenter Alan Khan. Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Yesterday, Israel admits that it only allowed 5 aid trucks into Gaza for over 2 million people. That is more than Northern Ireland's entire population. This weaponization of food is morally reprehensible. We must impose an arms embargo and sanctions on the Israeli officials that are responsible for these heinous crimes. Benjamin Netanyahu, Smotrich, and Ben-Gvir. I welcome the joint government statements with France. So given the fact that time is running out with every moment that we are standing here talking about this issue, can the Secretary of State clarify the conditions and the time frame for the very firmest of action? Foreign Secretary.
Well, can I say to my honourable friend that we've made the decisions that we've made today. She will recognise that there is an important conference convened by France and Saudi Arabia where we will be working jointly with those partners. And can I ask her to look carefully at the leader's statement and our absolute commitment to take further action if necessary to try and bring the course of action the Netanyahu government has set its desire on in terms of military expansion and the blockade of aid, that we will take further action if needed in the coming days and weeks.
Ayub Khan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This government has consistently maintained that the determination of genocide, ethnic cleansing and war crimes is a matter for a competent court. And yet the lawyers instructed by this government to defend against a case brought by Al-Haq recently have been unequivocal in that it is this government's firm position that no genocide is occurring, that we have no legal obligations to the International Court of Justice ruling, and that it is a matter for Parliament, not the courts. So I ask the Foreign Secretary to clarify, are these lawyers speaking on behalf of this government? And if this truly is the government's position, will he finally explain why he sees military support for Israel as compatible with our obligations under international law, rather than saying it's simply a matter for the courts?
Foreign Secretary.
I've got to say that's a crude caricature of a very serious issue. I took a decision back in September in relation to international humanitarian law and suspending arms sales that could be used in Gaza, because these are very, very serious issues. I understand the issues that are before the ICC and the ICJ. They are very, very serious issues. And it is because votes in this Parliament helped to set up those mechanisms and made us part of those mechanisms that I leave it to them to make the necessary determinations that they must properly make.
Dame Meg Hillier. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We have seen the slaughter of innocents going on for far too long. And as others have said, people are dying right now. I welcome the Foreign Secretary's statement, and I welcome the Prime Minister's statement yesterday with France and Canada. But the Foreign Secretary mentioned that he met with Vice President Vance and to really get a breakthrough on this, because Israel is not listening. America needs to be part of that. Is he able to tell us about that conversation with President Vance and whether he has any hope that we can make a statement jointly with the US as well? Foreign Secretary.
Well, I'm very grateful to the Right Honourable Lady, and I know that her constituents are deeply concerned with what is happening.
All right, we're going to transition to an economist saying that there's a list of worries that are growing in the United States. So, but before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and take this supplement that I've been taking since 2016. It is a very potent antioxidant. It's the second pillar of my core protocol. The first pillar is the Max 35, Max 14, or cleanse, boosts up your immune system. C60 is the second pillar, which I will be talking about shortly here. It's going to soak up a lot of free radicals. And turmeric, ashwagandha, and lignans brings down inflammation. That will help your immune system and your cardiovascular system. And Boomer Boost is the fourth pillar that will boost up your metabolism and your energy levels. So let's talk about the second pillar here. C60 is a very potent antioxidant. You take a teaspoon a day every day. Take it on an empty stomach for best absorption. If you work out, take it before your workout. It'll soak up the free radicals that you generate during the workout, and you will recover quicker. C60, you can get it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. It is cheaper per ounce to get the higher ounce configuration. You can get it in extra virgin olive oil. And you can get it in avocado oil and MCT coconut oil. And take it every day. Take a teaspoon a day. And what's going to happen is you're going to soak up those free radicals in the cell. When that happens, you're reducing the stress on the cell. The cell will perform better. The mitochondria will be healthier, and your ATP will go up. When you have lots of energy at the cellular level, your cells will perform better, and therefore your tissues will perform better. And over time, what will happen is that your organ systems are performing better and are healthier. That means your liver is going to perform better. That means your brain's going to perform better. That means your glands are going to perform better. Your endocrine system will reach homeostasis. your immune system will perform better. So it's important to do this every day to soak up those free radicals. And over a 1 year period, you're going to notice that you have more energy and you have more vitality and you look younger, you feel younger. And the reason is that you're soaking up those free radicals that cause damage to your cells. So you want to soak up those free radicals as much as you can. And when you're soaking up those free radicals at the bloodstream level, you're reducing the chances of oxidized LDL. When you reduce oxidized LDL from your bloodstream, you're reducing plaque formation. That is very important for your cardiovascular health. So pay attention, take the C60 every day, teaspoon a day. I've been taking C60 since 2016, every day. Now, you'll also notice some other benefits, depends on the person you talk to, but you may actually start feeling less joint pain. You may actually start having better eyesight. For me, I had glasses, I was farsighted, and I don't need to wear my glasses. If I see a lot of if I do a lot of screen time and it's a little bit dimmer because I'm getting older, it's a little bit dimmer, then I might need to wear my glasses to be able to read a page of paper or a menu or something like that. But that's very common. But the point I'm making is that C60 is actually going to improve other systems in your body that you just are kind of surprised that it improved. For me, it was my eyesight, all right? Other people also see benefits with eyesight. You'll also notice that you'll be able to think more clearly, and it'll get rid of that brain fog. And the reason why is it's soaking up the free radicals at the neural level, reducing the stress on the neuron so the neuron is healthier. When the neuron is healthy, the myelin sheath on the axon of the neuron is going to be robust. And that allows for the electrical transmission to take place. If your myelin sheaths are unhealthy and start to flake off, that electrical transmission is poor, short-circuiting. So you want healthy neurons. So soaking up free radicals is reducing the stress at the neural level. And you're bringing the health of the mitochondria. You need lots of mitochondria in your neuron. It's going to bring the health of that mitochondria up. You're going to have more ATP to create the neurotransmitters. So when you're creating these neurotransmitters, you're going to actually have better neuroplasticity. So the dendritic connections are going to improve. If you couple this with a holistic approach with proper diet and exercise, you're going to get better blood flow. And you're going to have at the micro level, micro environment, a micronutrient environment that's going to allow for positive neuroplasticity. So that basically means that you are going to have a healthier brain. So it takes time. You got to soak up those free radicals, let those tissues and let those cells heal, boost up that mitochondrial health, get those ATP levels up, and over time, your tissues will perform better, including your neurons. It's a holistic approach. You got to filter your water, proper diet, proper exercise, proper sleep, proper supplementation. When you do this in a holistic way and you apply this supplement protocol, you're going to slow down that aging process and improve your tissues. It's a very simple concept. It's not, it's not rocket science or anything like this. It's very simple concept. Bring down inflammation, neutralize pathogens, bring down free radicals, boost up your metabolism. And when you do that in a holistic way, you're going to actually have your body heal. And your immune system is going to get better, and your other tissue systems will get better. It takes time. There's a compound effect. That's the reason why you should be doing it every day. Not everybody can do what I'm doing, but if you do the core that I just mentioned, that core protocol, So that'll do wonders. Taking C60 and stacking it with NAD+ and ubiquinol, major benefits for neural protection. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the C60, take it every day. I've been taking it since 2016. And the surprise that I had, on top of noticing that my aging is slowing down, was that I didn't need to use my glasses for farsightedness and stigmatism. But you may notice something different for your body. Everybody's biochemistry is slightly different. If someone says your body biochemistry is exactly the same as someone else's, unless you're a twin or a triplet, they're just wrong. Everybody's biochemistry changes over time too. So the biochemistry that you had when you were younger versus the way you are now in your later years, it's different. Biochemistry changes over time, and everybody's biochemistry is slightly different. So that's the reason why you need to pay attention to your body. Apply a holistic approach. Some supplements you may want to increase your dosage. Some supplements you may want to decrease your dosage. And that's the reason why it's important to get tests, blood tests, or other biofeedback or biometric data. Blood tests are really important, all right? And that will give you what's going on with your cells, what's your cellular count, what's your mineral levels, how's your kidneys functioning, your liver enzymes. Getting this telemetry, getting this data, and doing that every year, what you're going to notice is that when you apply a health protocol, a holistic health protocol, with the proper diet, proper exercise, proper supplementation, that these biometric numbers are going to improve. Your lipid profiles will improve. Your blood pressure will improve. And then you can get a little bit more advanced where there's radiological imaging or ultrasound imaging or calcium screening, imaging. When you get older, you should have a calcium screening test to see if there's calcium depositing around your heart. If you do, well, there's a protocol to reduce that calcium, reduce the further advancement of calcium deposits, but also over time to slowly bring that calcium down. That's actually in my longevity cardiovascular box. Another thing that's important is to have a stress test and, see how your heart's functioning. Stress tests are important to see if there's any valvular issues that you may have. But the point here is to get data. When you get the data and you actually apply a holistic approach with the proper supplementation, you're going to actually see your numbers improve. And that's where the proof of what I'm doing will show up in your data. But everybody's biochemistry is slightly different. So listen to what I'm saying and take a look at that biometric feedback when you get these blood tests or other tests. Another thing that's very important that is not talked about enough in the United States is make sure you get your cancer screening tests. Very important as you get older. Colonoscopies, very important. My aunt passed away because she passed away from metastasized colon cancer, but she got it later in life because she didn't screen for it. It was totally preventable. But a lot of people are afraid to get it or don't know to get it. Make sure you get your colon screenings, very important. Guys, make sure you get that, since we're talking about PSAs in the news with Biden and prostate cancer. Guys, you need to get that PSA test. Very important. And get it annually, right? Have your heart looked at. Make sure that you have an EKG done. And, a stress test, calcium screening. These are really important things. As a female that's getting older, you probably need a bone density test. So there's lots of things to get feedback. The point I'm making is that working with a physician and getting feedback and applying a holistic approach to improving your health and slowing down the aging process, you will see your data improve. For example, as a baseline, get your carotid artery scanned, ultrasound scan, maybe even Dopplered. You know, sometimes these ultrasounds have Doppler and have it Dopplered. Well, you'll know how much blockage you have. Well, that would be your baseline. And then you start applying the longevity cardiovascular box that I have in my store that helps to reduce the plaque and reduce the chances of building up further plaque. And over time, what you're going to actually notice after about a year or a year and a half, that the blockage has reduced. You can't get all of it out, but you've reduced it. But it's a holistic approach. It's the proper diet, proper exercise, proper supplementation. If you listen to what people have done through their own experience, what they've seen with their own data, understanding and listening to their changes of biochemistry, taking lessons learned from sports medicine, taking lessons learned from aging medicine, in that research, in longevity research, you can apply it and tweak it for your own benefit. And believe me, there is no doctor out there that you see that cares about your health as much as you. If you don't take charge of yourself and get educated and to get on board and listen to your body and nourish your body in a holistic way, if you don't do that, you are going to have problems when you get older. And you're going to go down the same route that most people go down, where their energy levels go down, they start to atrophy with their musculature, their neural health starts to decline, and you get on pharmaceuticals all the way into the rest of your life. That's costly, and there are side effects. If you listen to what I am saying, you are drastically reducing the chances of going down that road. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take the C60. I've been taking it since 2016. Take it every day, teaspoon a day. Soak up those free radicals. Take it on an empty stomach for best absorption. It needs to be in a lipid. That's the reason why it's in MCT coconut oil, avocado oil, or extra virgin olive oil. If you take C60 in a powdered form, you are taking it the wrong way. It has to be in a lipid for proper absorption. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. Listen to me and you'll get healthy. It's very simple.
Instead of calling in favors from those distant relatives, Tom and Jenny.
Cousin Mikey.
You're right.
A lot to worry about. Fed officials just told us to take summer off, basically. That they'll get back together in September and consider what to do. Do you think they need to do something before then?
I don't think they need to do nothing before, but I do think that the list of worries is indeed growing. It used to be the case for the last several months that we've been worrying mainly about the trade war. What is coming from the trade war, very importantly, is what Jamie Dimon pointed out yesterday, namely that now we're going to see the negative effects of tariffs on earnings and therefore also on the economy. The Yale Budget Lab is quantifying that the impact on GDP this year will be minus 0.7. Normally GDP growth is 2, so if I subtract minus 0.7, that brings me to still 1.3. That's not a recession, but it certainly is something that will be pushing the unemployment rate up in the same calculation by roughly 0.5 percentage point. So the first thing is tariffs. We are still waiting to see the actual effects of tariffs, both on earnings and on the economy. And the things that are being added now more recently is student loan payments are restarting, is beginning to hit people's credit scores. That's about 9 million people now who potentially will have a hit to their credit scores and therefore will have challenges going out buying a house, going out buying a car, going out buying a washer and dryer. And third and finally, the downgrade. Yes, the market reaction yesterday may be more mild. And yes, we did go from the US being hyper exceptional to just being exceptional. but it's certainly a risk with the fiscal discussion and in rates markets that we are also adding on to the layer in terms of the issues that we're talking about.
You see this stress in the buy now, pay later data as well, and you've seen that build for a number of months. The question I would ask, the brutal reality is, low-income workers haven't had a good run for a long, long time. That's been true even when people came on this program and said the economy was good. Do you see the stress migrating up income levels at all?
That is exactly what's going on. So you saw Klarna yesterday say that they were reporting that buy now, pay later was seeing more weakness among consumers. And the issue is exactly that is migrating up towards middle-income households. You're seeing this also more broadly in, for example, in the housing data. The Sonda weekly data for traffic for home builders is beginning to slow down. And this spring selling season has basically been much weaker than the spring selling season we've seen for the last few years. So also the weakness in the housing market is a leading indicator telling you that the middle income consumer is also beginning to look more stressed.
So you don't necessarily see recession, but this downside to growth that comes at a time of pricing pressure is something that looks a bit like stagflation. And I wonder, some people say, well, if it's not a recession, then it's pretty good. Is this actually a worst case scenario for risk assets because there isn't a very obvious reaction function from the Federal Reserve, from policymakers to respond to the fundamental underlying weakness in consumers?
Exactly, because inflation.
If you notice that a lot of the newscasters on Bloomberg, they always keep on stressing the Federal Reserve needs to lower rates so we can have a better economy. The problem is that we have too much market distortion, especially in the bond market, because of the Federal Reserve. And the way that the institutional investors are right now, they want the cheap money. The banks want the cheap money. And the only way to have the cheap money is for the Federal Reserve to lower rates. The problem comes in is that if you really pay attention, zero bound is a very dangerous place to be for a central bank. Because if they have to go negative, that means that you don't get interest from your bank. You give interest to your bank. So you want to have a little bit of a buffer. Would you drive your car without shocks, shock absorbers down the highway? No, of course not. Then why would we want to go to zero bound for the Federal Reserve?
If that is now going up, we've heard all the stories from Walmart, now Subaru, various, of course, retailers are saying prices will be moving higher over the coming quarters. That's what everyone expects. This is a textbook definition of a trade war, namely higher prices, because imports of containers that come in to Los Angeles, of course, things will become more expensive. And that is exactly challenging the Fed's room for maneuvering, because they will have to keep rates higher for longer in response to almost no matter what growth is doing. If growth, of course, gets into a deep recession, they will be cutting. But if growth is just weakening, and that is the expectation from the consensus, that's what we're seeing in the data, then you will have this stagflation situation, which is very uncomfortable from a Fed perspective, because inflation higher for longer says the Fed should be hiking, but growth slowing down says the Fed should be cutting. So this becomes...
I think what you're going to start seeing within a 6-month period, to within 12-month period, that the economy grew and the stock market is going to be at an all-time high. Now, why is that? Well, you're going to have some prices that are going to be a little bit higher. But I think that the expectation of the tariff war affecting the economy is way overblown. In addition, there's going to be a wealth effect. As the stock market is going up, people are going to want to buy more. Now, will that translate into new home buys and new home construction? Probably not, because the interest rates are still going to be relatively high compared to post-Lehman levels of mortgage rates. All right. But there's going to be a wealth effect that builds up. And I'm not too concerned about it. I was having this thought, and because I believe the way the market works is complexity science, all right, or chaos theory. And a lot of this kind of research came out of the Santa Fe Institute in the 90s. So these concepts. But think of the market as a sand castle, all right, or a sand mound. If the market grows, increases price, especially these indexes like S&P 500, grows too fast, then the stability of the sand mountain is very unstable. very low, right? The stability is very low. So the probability of the sides of the mountain to slide down because there's not a good foundation underneath it is very high. But if you add sand slowly, right, and very slowly, over time, the actual foundation of that mound is actually more stable. Now, if you look at complex systems like sand grains in a mountain or on a sand mountain, when more sand is added, it will slide and have these little landslides. And it's creating a foundation for the next buildup of sand. And over time, you will slowly build a better foundation. All right. So that landslide leads to the next wave of building up new sand, which over time will be the foundation, better foundation. So we saw a landslide that took place 4 weeks ago. Now we can use fundamental analysis to define why it happened. It's the trade tariff war and all this stuff, right? And all the analysts figuring out how it's going to affect the economy and everyone's freaking out. But you can just step back and forget about that fundamental analysis and just think of it in just a complex system, complexity science lens or filter. And what you're going to notice is through that chaos of that landslide, it actually will lead to a better foundation for the next leg up. Now, in terms of the sand mountain, it means that the sand will start to build up again after that landslide. And there's going to be a more stable mountain over time. Same thing in the stock market. The same thing. Landslide took place, and now further new deployed capital is coming in. The new sand is starting to build up on the S&P 500 for a better foundation. This is the reason why I use Fibonacci sequences and retracements, because the universe runs on this. You look at the way the world, the universe, there's spirals, there are fib sequences, there are fractals. We live in a fractal world. Even an embryo develops as a fractal. The way the brain is, if you look at the primal brain and your higher level cortex and how it spirals, that's a fractal. Your whole body is a fractal. So through the embryology and the development of that embryo, that's a fractal. The universe is a fractal. Particles, when they're coming out from, thinking of it, going all the way back to the Big Bang, where there's just high energy and there's cooling off, and then you have high energy particles coming into existence from that super dense energy. As the universe is starting to cool off, there are additional particles that are starting to develop. That's a fractal. You can model that as a fractal. The world runs on fib sequences. That is Mother Nature, if you want to use that as a term, is defined in these fractals. And we are just a this is where the spirituality comes into play here. We are a remnant of a long distant fractal going all the way back to the Big Bang. And so complex systems will always have this behavior, a fractal, where there's a retracement and then a rebuild. There's death and then there's birth again. Societies rise and fall. but there is a continuation. There's a buildup. All right. A recycling of the old into something new. So this is, I think, a very important key point. Do not bet against the United States. Do not. You will fail in the your financial well-being if you bet against the United States. If you want to short the dollar, short the treasury, short the equity market in the United States long term, you will fail. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Don't bet against America ever in your life. That's rule number one. Rule number two is that there are going to be these times where there's these landslides and then a further foundational build that takes place. And this is a fundamental principle in the universe. You'll see it in the stock market. You'll see it in biology. You see it in astrophysics. It's a fundamental principle of nature. So with that, let's continue on Bloomberg because they're so smart.
Question for the Fed, do they like apples and oranges? Do they put more weight on inflation being high? Or do they put more weight on growth slowing down?
So it goes to something that John was talking about, Jamie Dimon yesterday, talking about this complacency in markets, particularly with risk assets, given the fact that, yes, you have these tariffs, but you also have this kind of backdrop that does pressure the consumer. Do you think that risk assets really are not pricing in this type of backdrop at a time when you've seen big rebounds in this wake of any kind of sell-off?
I think the stock market is backward looking at the moment. The stock market is not taking into account the fact that we have these three different forces that are now pushing the economy down. First of all, we have tariffs weighing on earnings, tariffs weighing on GDP, tariffs pushing the unemployment rate up. We have also student loan problems that will hit people's ability to borrow. And finally, we also have the Moody's downgrade. Yes, again, that might just be a thing in markets where we said, oh, this just went and came away and all of a sudden it's no longer an issue. But it is certainly something that this conversation, the direction of travel when it comes to the fiscal discussion is only one way, namely that we will see debt levels go up. And there's more and more discussion around what does that mean, not only for rates, but also for the dollar. And note also yesterday, by the way, that the dollar went down, even though rates went on a round trip, still telling you that there is something here to think about in terms of the bigger picture, not only in terms of what rates are doing. And then when the dollar goes down, of course, we get even more inflationary pressure.
This is the problem that I have with these guys. And I'm going to have to do a chart, proving my point here. They're only looking at a very narrow contemporary window of price movement with dollar. If you look at a 10 or 15 year price series, the dollar was elevated above 100 post-COVID. All right. The reason why was everyone was concerned that the rest of the world was going to hell. Now we're going back to normal levels, below 100, because the world is healing from a crisis, a financial crisis, and a physiological crisis. And when you're talking about yields have been going up since COVID. Bond yields, all right? The 10-year, the 30-year, they've been going up since 2020. A big part of that is because of all this fiscal spending to boost up the economy. Yields were going down because the Federal Reserve was interfering with the market and doing market operations and then went to zero bound because of Lehman back in 2007, 2008. We felt the effects from 2007, 2008, all the way to now, but especially to 2020. And then there had been a major fiscal stimulus going into the system that led to yields going up because of the crisis of 2020. If you don't believe me, just look at time series. Look at a 15-year time series of the 10-year and the 30. And what you'll notice is going all the way back to the 80s and 70s, there was a steady decline of the yield price for the 10 and the 10-year and the 30-year. And it bottomed out in 2020 and came back up. Now, a big part of that is the unraveling of that aftershock of Lehman from the Federal Reserve, right? Because you're talking about almost 20 years of balance sheet manipulation, but also this fiscal stimulus that took place during the crisis. And the need, and it couples with the need of the Federal Reserve to get out of zero bound. The Federal Reserve doesn't want to be at zero bound. Because if it needs to stimulate the economy, how do you stimulate the economy if you had a federal funds rate at 0.25%? You don't have a shock absorber. You have to have a buffer. And that buffer, depending on the economist, would say 4%, 5% buffer. So the Federal Reserve can lower rates and dial in the economy and calibrate it. But if you are at zero bound, you can't calibrate. You don't have a shock absorber. So we're actually moving towards a normal, stable economy. But everyone was so focused on yields are low. But that was because the Federal Reserve was manipulating the market. And so the economist early on in the video was stating, well, the Federal Reserve should be, lowering rates. That's what we should be doing. No, what we need to be is going to a stable pre-Lehman dynamic. That means higher rates. We're getting closer. The yields that we have now are closer to the pre-Lehman levels. Pre-Lehman, before 2007. Don't you think that was actually the dynamics that we're starting to see in the dollar and the yield curve is actually a healthier economy? Or do you think that constant intervention by the Federal Reserve for the last almost 20 years is the better way to go? So don't worry about the bond yields going up. If you're getting older, lock in at a higher rate. Like, for example, the 10-year yield, the 10-year yield is at 4.48. It's almost 4.5. And the 30-year yield is below 5. It's at 4.9. But if you're getting older and the 30-year bond is locking in at 5%, don't you want to get into locking in with fixed income at higher interest so you don't have to take the risks? I would say yes. I mean, that's just basic investing, all right? Low risk, basic investing. You getting older and you locking in at a higher yield is actually a good thing, not a bad thing. Now, take the other side of the coin. Let's say you were getting older and the Federal Reserve was at zero bound. How are you going to get a higher interest rate or coupon payment for fixed income? You can't, because it's so low. So now there is no free lunch. Everyone's looking for a free lunch, and there is none. But the point here is that we're going to a pre-Lehman dynamic, which is a healthy dynamic. If we assume that post-Lehman numbers in terms of the dollar and the yield curve and all this, right? Even our economic clustering. If we think that during that Lehman situation, post-Lehman situation, that's a healthy economy, you're wrong. You're totally wrong. It shows that that is a heavily intervened economy by the Federal Reserve. We're going back to levels that are normal. But none of these economists are saying this because they're always just looking at, well, the dollar's going up or the dollar's going down. Let's look at DXY, which is a major index for the dollar. It's at 100. And above 100, that's COVID stuff for the last 5 years. All right. So if we look at a series, the last time it was this high, right, was around going all the way back to before 2000. So 25 years ago. Now you think that $1 at this level is homeostasis? The data set doesn't prove that. The data set says that we're actually in the upper bound and that it has to come back down. And so if we want to look at the average for that, for a level, we're talking about, maybe 96, 97 for DXY. I'm thinking 97, maybe even 98 is a fair value right now. So when they say the dollar is weakening, it really isn't weakening. And are treasury yields really exploding because people are running away from the United States? No. And whatever China is selling or not buying is being eaten up by buyers in Japan, in the UK, in Canada. I think also in Denmark. Saudi Arabia, and also US investors. The biggest bond holders for the United States is not a foreign country. It's the United States. They don't talk about that. They don't want to give you that. They don't want to give you. They don't want to give you the right perception. They want to give you a skewed perception. We actually owe the money to ourselves. That's the reality of the situation. I'll tell you, you got to look at the historical data sets. Don't believe this horseshit about them saying that the dollar is weakening and the yields are going to explode and blah, blah, blah. There's always going to be buyers to lock in a high yield for bonds. That's the reason why bond volatility in terms of absolute price or absolute yields in terms of difference doesn't move that much compared to stock. Because stock, it's different. There's only one type of buyer. I mean, with broad brushing this, there's only one type of buyer, the one that wants an appreciation of the stock. Now you can use complex strategies and short markets and stuff like that as hedging strategies and all this, but people want the stock to go up. Bonds are different. There are short-term buyers of bonds, which they want the prices to go up. There are long-term bond holders that want the duration to lock in at a high rate. So you have two types of buyers. Very different dynamic. And that's why the bond market is less volatile. But they don't want to tell you that. They don't want to tell you that. Don't bet against the United States. You will lose if you do.
And that complicates the job for the Fed even further.
Torsten, you keep talking about downside risks. Do you see any upside risk to policy proposals right now in Washington?
I do think that the stock market's focus on deals when it comes to trade deals. We do see, of course, that there could be some good chance that we could get some deals, of course, over the coming weeks and months ahead. But the issue here is that the policy has already been implemented. Let's not forget
but it's
that
on pause.
But average tariff rates went from in January 3% to now 18%. So that's a fairly dramatic shock. Remember in 2017-18.
That was the landslide. And we're using this as an opportunity, using complexity science to build a better foundation for a upleg on the equity market. That's applying complexity science or chaos theory. All right? Now, just being pragmatic, take this as an opportunity to purchase more stock in broad indexes so you benefit more from when we do surge beyond the all-time high of the S&P 500. I just use your brain. Just look at the last chart, the last like 2 or 3 years for the S&P 500. Just look at the price chart. You really believe that we're not going to be at an all-time high this year? We will be at an all-time high for the S&P 500, most likely in July. These guys are clowns. They're clowns. They're clowns.
First term, tariff rates went from 2 to 3, and now we went from 3 to 18. That's a very significant impact, which is exactly why this earnings season gave this outcome that companies are having a hard time giving forward.
But why is it that Goldman Sachs and many other analysts, banking analysts, are upgrading many, not all, but many stocks for their price target? They're doing upgrades for price targets. Now, there are some companies that are getting downgraded, and that's just a sign of a healthy economy. It's not across the board downgrades. I'm telling you, trust me on this, just like you need to trust me on improving your health. The United States is going to surge. The stock market is going to surge.
Companies are having, of course, a lot of challenges with dealing with higher tariffs. That's why Ford Motor Company had losses of $1.5 billion, Apple losses of $900 million. It really is significant how these coming motions of what will happen to earnings and GDP are not being priced into markets at the moment.
In your office, at your headquarters, on the calendar, what's circled? What dates? Which month?
So what's most important is back to the square, the circle is what you said about the Fed meeting. It is very important how the Fed communicates about this. So far, FOMC members have said, we have a wait and see mode, because it's fair to say, John Williams said this, and Powell also has been talking about this, it's fair to say, let's wait and see what the data actually is going to turn out like. But if I turn on my Bloomberg screen and type ECFC, go and look at what is the consensus expectation to inflation this year, it's going up. What's the consensus expectation to GDP growth? It's going down. As an investor, this should be the number one thing to look at when I do asset allocation. So the answer to your question is the incoming data, does it play out as the consensus and the textbook would predict, namely that inflation is going to go up and GDP is going to go down? And I would expect that is exactly what we're looking at over the next several quarters.
I think you're going to have a slowdown of GDP, but then a surge of GDP. And then you're going to see, you want to get into the market before that takes place. He's going to be late to the party. Trust me on this. Just like all these investors out there, they were like going, oh my God, they're afraid to missing out now. Because they kept on telling the audience day after day for 3 weeks, this is going to be, Armageddon and blah, blah, blah. But the equity market is trading at 5,941. 5 weeks ago, it was trading at 4,800. And 20 or 30. And I told people, buy. If you paid attention to me, you would have made 22%, 18%, 10%, depending on where you put your positions and how you were dollar cost averaging. But you would have made money. Listen to these clowns that are on Bloomberg. You would have had analysis paralysis and wouldn't have made money. You'd still be waiting for your previous deployed capital to break even from the fall. If you create your starting point from the moment the market started falling, the value of your account at that moment in time, you're still waiting for that recovery. But if you deployed new capital, that new capital would have gained 22% or anywhere from 10 to 22% return in 5 weeks. Trump gave you a gift, and these clowns can't even see it.
Short-lived or persistent? They say they need time. New York Fed President John Williams said maybe by September. Is that enough time to know whether it's one and not the other?
Well, hold on. So there are two very important aspects of that. Beth Hammack said in a speech here 2 weeks ago at the Hoover Institution that she is already seeing companies that are not impacted by tariffs also raising prices because competitors are raising prices. And the second thing also, let's think about it the following. If it ends up being the case that you will have imports that are significantly lower and therefore you will have less variety on the shelves, that means that I may not be able to buy a white shirt and a bright color. And if that's the case, then the price of all the shirts that are left will be going up. So that means that it's not only about this one-time lift in changing the sticker and what is the price of my shirt, but it's also that if there is less variety, if there's less goods coming in, and if we're trying to avoid and prevent goods from coming in, it will mean that the goods that are left might see a more permanent increase in inflation. So that's why this is not just a temporary feature in terms of thinking about inflation. It is something that potentially could have more longer-lasting impact.
NYU Langone Health maintains the lowest mortality rates in the nation, which means
Buy. I'm telling you. You're going to make money. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great products that I have. These are products that I use on a daily basis. And one of those products is the structural nanosilver gel. You can get it in a tube form or in a dispenser form. You use it the same way. It's a multi-purpose product. You can use it as a aftershave. You can use it as a daily skincare. If you're sick or you're not feeling well and someone else is not feeling well around you, you can put it on your hands, around your nose, around your eyes, or around your ears, lightly coat your nostrils, and it'll stay active for 5.5 hours. You can't do that with Perel. And oh, by the way, Perel is an alcohol base that will crack your skin. It actually does damage to your skin. Structural nanosilver gel heals your skin and neutralizes. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the structural nanosilver gel. You can also apply it on a cut, an abrasion, a minor burn. It'll help to heal it quicker. It's a dual purpose product. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Make sure you get some for work. Make sure you have it at home. You never know when you need it. Also, a little trick. If you have drainage, copious drainage, because you're not feeling well and you got the common cold or whatever, put the structural nanosilver gel, coat your nostrils, and what you'll notice is that that stuffiness will decrease. It'll help to reduce that drainage, and that soreness will start to decrease too, and help soothe it. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get structural nanosilver gels. Very high quality. And I've been telling you to use these things for 5 years. And you can use it as a daily skincare. That's another important feature. Can't do that with Perel. If you just listen to me, you'll be so much farther better off with your health and your wealth. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the toothpaste. The toothpaste, structural nanosilver toothpaste, it will whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, reduce inflammation at the gum line, and improve the health of your gums. So please go to my store, get this structural nanosilver toothpaste, get a few tubes for it for your household. It has structural nanosilver, has no fluoride, and with good oral hygiene, you're reducing the chances of cardiovascular disease and valvular disease. A lot of people that are in their geriatric years start to have poor oral hygiene and exacerbates problems with their vascular system and their valvular system. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nanosilver toothpaste. You can't get a better toothpaste than this. There is nothing out there. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. It is the best toothpaste. All right, let's go back to Bloomberg. But before we do, let's take a look at the oil markets. UCO is trading at 21.30, Gush is trading at 22.37, and DRIP is trading at 10.26. And we have oil trading at $61.83 a barrel. Natural gas is trading at 3.354.
How that whole $6 billion works out. But it's not just Pfizer. It's like a lot of competition has been set on China-originated drugs to kind of refill their pipelines over the past year. I mean, you have global data saying the number of large pharma licensing deals from China reached a record high in 2024. So more companies are starting to do this.
What else you got?
And so Amer Sports, okay, they make the Wilson tennis rackets, Louisville Slugger bats. I know my money goes to that. DeMarini bats on top of it. Its shares have been up as much as 17%. So it boosted its adjusted profit forecast for the full year, right? Reported first quarter results topped expectations. A big part of it, Solomon ski boots.
Yes,
you're the
those are mine.
skier.
Those
Okay,
are
you're
mine.
the skier. I'm not the big time skier. Arc'teryx, the hiking gear. I don't know if anyone's into that too. Those are like the big movers for them. When it comes to tariffs, though, the company just says that, you know what, we're going to manage through it because we have these premium brands. They said they're going to continue to operate its business with flexibility. In their fourth quarter report, though, they did talk a lot about 20% of their sourcing came from China, Vietnam, Canada, and Mexico in 2024. China and Vietnam made up the most of that, but they're saying they're going to weather through the storm, the tariff storm.
All right, Lisa, thanks so much. We really appreciate it. Bloomberg's Lisa Mateo joining us there for more conversation just like this. Subscribe to our new Stock Movers reports. Listen for 5-minute audio reports on the biggest winners and losers in the stock market. Subscribe to Stock Movers on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. So earlier, Tesla CEO Elon Musk spoke with Michelle Hussein, editor-at-large for Bloomberg Weekend at the Qatar Economic Forum in Doha. In this part of the conversation, Musk was asked about his commitment to Tesla as well as his pay package.
Tell me then how committed you are to Tesla. Do you see yourself, and are you committed to still being the chief executive of Tesla in 5 years' time?
Yes.
No doubt about that at all.
Well, no, I might die.
Okay, short of that.
I can't be to you if I'm dead. So there's a slight amount of time.
Does that mean that the value of your pay doesn't have any bearing on your decision?
Well, that's not really a subject for discussion in this forum. I think obviously there should be compensation for, if there's something incredible is done, that compensation should match that something incredible was done. But I'm confident that whatever some activist posing as a judge in Delaware happens to do will not affect the future compensation.
This is the judge who twice struck down the $56 billion pay package that was awarded to you. I think the value on the current value of stock options. Yeah.
Not a judge. The activist who is cosplaying a judge in a Halloween costume.
Okay, that's your characterization. I think
Yes.
on the current value of stock options, I think the actual
Justice according to the law.
on the current value of stock options, I think the value of that pay package stands at about $100 billion. Are you saying you are relaxed about the value of your future pay package? Your decision to be committed to Tesla for the next 5 years, as long as you are still with us on this planet, is completely independent of pay?
No.
It's not independent. So pay is a relevant factor then to your commitment to Tesla.
A sufficient voting control such that I cannot be ousted by activist investors is what matters to me. And I've said this publicly many times. But let's not have this whole thing be a discussion of my alleged pay. It's not a money thing. It's a reasonable control thing over the future of the company, especially if we're building millions, potentially billions of humanoid robots. I can't be sitting there and one day get tossed out by, for political reasons, by activists. That would be unacceptable. That's all that matters.
All right, that was Tesla CEO Elon Musk speaking with Michelle Hussein, editor-at-large for Bloomberg Weekend at the Qatar Economic Forum in Doha. And we're joined right now by the very same Michelle Hussein. Michelle, yeoman's duty interviewing Elon Musk there, not the easiest subject to converse with. What's your takeaway as to, I guess, his, kind of evolution back into corporate world away from some of his government responsibilities? Is that going to be a smooth transition? Is that going to be an immediate transition? What was your takeaway?
Hello, Paul. Hello, Alex, from Doha. Yeah, it's definitely quite an experience to interview Elon Musk. And for all your listeners, because anyone who saw it on Bloomberg TV or elsewhere on the live stream will know that it's a remote conversation. So I'm in Doha. He's in the US. But actually, it's probably a pretty intense experience interviewing him, whatever the format or the setting. I was very struck by the fact that the thing he wanted to emphasize was very much his corporate world and his businesses, not his role with Doge, despite the fact we know it's ongoing. And he said he'll be at the president's side for the remainder of this administration, in fact, even though Doge doesn't last for the whole duration. And when I asked him about whether this year is a pivotal year for that reason, he was kind of keen to characterize it as like, he's seen many ups and downs in his time. But I feel less political donations and spend a lot less money on politics in the future. I wonder if really, as he said to me, I'm a technologist first and foremost, and I wonder if this, if these political endeavors have not given him exactly what he wanted and have put him on more uncomfortable ground than he'd ever acknowledge.
Yeah, I do have to give you a lot of credit. That was a tough interview. Anything remote like that on a conference stage is tough. And it was also really tough. You handled it really well. You didn't miss a beat. You flawlessly picked up all those questions. So I just have to give real kudos to you on that. And you pushed him quite a bit in the EV sales. And he seemed to really stand behind, no, we're doing really well with the exception of Europe. What was some of your broader takeaway from that part of the conversation?
Well, look, it's clearly incredibly important to him. Tesla is a totemic company, and he has changed the car industry, not just electric vehicles. He has changed the car industry through what he's done there. It's also, of course, a very, very significant part of his wealth. So therefore, you can see that it's important on lots of different factors. Of course, the sales figures, I had them right in front of me for Europe, and these are big markets and places where people are, very concerned about climate and have bought into Tesla and its vision for that reason. So it'll be we do get month by month sales. So I was looking at the April ones. It'll be very interesting to see what happens in May. But obviously he's saying Europe is our weakest market, and look at the rest of the world. And he feels that Tesla has turned a corner, and his commitment to it. The bit you played about pay and the his pay award is obviously he's kind of like had the words that everyone heard on the judge who ruled against him in Delaware. But I think it's clear Tesla's incredibly important to him. And, while he's got, other businesses that are at this point, growing strongly in all markets, Starlink being a prime example of that, and the number of countries that are keen to get a slice of Starlink action and give him access to their jurisdictions for Starlink. I think there is something totemic about Tesla, and I think it came out in that, how keen he is for the brand to regain ground everywhere. Whether or not he can do it in Europe, I don't know.
Michelle, kind of, through the election and up in the first couple of weeks of the administration, Elon Musk was everywhere in every photo op and every video clip. And then he's really kind of gone radio silent for the last month or two. Where do you think how do you think this is going to play out over the coming weeks and months with him in terms of, re-engaging?
Well, I think those Q1 sales figures at Tesla really forced that, but I wonder if, again, not that he bit off more than he could chew, but politics and government is a very different world. And I think it's probably a mutual benefit that he and the president have been, much less visible at each other's side. I'm sure they are still very close, although Elon Musk has been public about his differences with Peter Navarro. And in many ways, where the tariff argument has ended up is much more in the Elon world and to Elon's worldview on trade rather than the Peter Navarro world. But I think what he said about political donations and less political spending in future will be looked at with interest in other countries as well. In the UK, for example, where Donald Trump is close to Nigel Farage, there would have been a lot of interest in whether at some point Elon Musk finds a way to donate to a UK political party, i.e. finds a UK entity to enable that kind of donation to take place. Remember, he's been seen a lot with the AfD leader in Germany. So I do wonder whether this intent and his words on political have implications beyond the US.
All right, Michelle, we got to leave it there. Thank you so much. Really great stuff. Michelle Hussein, thanks for joining us. Editor-at-large for Bloomberg Weekend. Also, just stay tuned for Bloomberg for everything from the Qatar Economic Forum. Really wonderful interviews there. All right, John Creekmore is coming up, Chief Investment Officer at Creekmore Wealth Advisors. What do you do in these markets when they're doing a whole lot of nothing? And Tyler Kendall will give us the latest from Capitol Hill. She's Bloomberg Television Washington correspondent as we have President Trump roaming the halls of Capitol Hill. This is Bloomberg.
All right, let me plug in and plug another set of products here before we go to the next video. But it's important to mention that the S&P 500 is trading at 5,947, and the VIX is trading at 1815. So right now it's stable. Nothing's, you know, it's down by 15 points, but everything's stable. No big deal right now. I think what's happening is we're waiting for positive news to come out from Washington about the tax bill. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin C and magnesium. This will help with your skin, your immune system, and your brain function. Magnesium is very important for brain health. Magnesium also helps the efficacy of D3, vitamin D3. Magnesium and zinc, brain health and immune system, really important. You can get magnesium 3 different ways from my store. Through magnesium and zinc, the vitamin C and magnesium supplement, or the Boomer Boost. So please go to my store and take a look at those to get the magnesium. But stack it. Stack magnesium and zinc together. It's a great way to boost up your immune system and help with your brain function. So please go to my store, drink it with filtered water, really important. Get the vitamin C, magnesium, and the magnesium and zinc, boost up that immune system, and help with your brain function. Really important. So let's go to I want to go to Times Radio. They're talking about Trump ready to slam down sanctions on Putin.
I'm obviously very happy down here in Fort Lauderdale. Every day I get to play the sport I love for a job, and I get to live in the.
It is interesting, Kate, that we've got a senator, Senator Graham, Lindsey Graham, here in Washington, who's normally very close to President Trump. And he has 70 or 72 co-sponsors out of 100 senators. So a clear majority, a veto-proof majority, bipartisan, for a very strong sanctions regime on Russia.
And William B. Taylor joins me now. Good morning.
Morning, Kate. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Now, look, it's difficult to determine exactly how well this phone call has gone because, of course, none of us could listen into it. But what do you make reading between the lines of the statements we've had from President Putin and President Trump?
Well, I had hoped to hear that President Trump had been clearer with President Putin about what he expected, what President Trump expected. President Trump, as you remember, as you probably reported, Kate, had a good conversation with Europeans and Ukrainians last weekend, and they agreed that what was necessary was an immediate ceasefire, and that Putin should agree to immediate ceasefire. And if he didn't, there would be sanctions put on. And there was some discussion of the kinds of sanctions that were being discussed. I didn't hear much of that out of this phone call today. So the opportunity to be clear with President Putin as to how this war has to end, how he has to come to the table to negotiate first a ceasefire, it sounds like he may have missed opportunity.
It does sound, from what President Trump has said, that he has almost pressed the pause button. And I think we've heard from J.D. Vance and others close to the president, this idea that, you know, Putin might be tapping him along. And Trump has said, you know, come back and ask me again in a couple of days whether I'm being tapped along. What should we make of that?
Well, two things. One is, I think it's dawning on people in the U.S. administration, in particular Mr. Trump and Mr. Vance, that President Putin does tap them along. President Putin does stall. He is stalling on this, and the way to end that stalling is to make it clear to him that he cannot win. That he has to face. Putin has to recognize that the determination of the Americans and the Europeans and the Ukrainians is such that he can't wait us out. So that's the first thing. But the second thing I think it is also clear that this is a very high priority for this administration, the U.S. administration. They talked about it, President Trump talked about it as a candidate, about solving this problem in a day. Of course, that didn't happen, but he did continue to talk about, and to his credit, has put in a lot of time, has put in a lot of phone calls, has given us a lot of thought, has talked about it a lot. So I believe this is a high priority for this administration, and to walk away without a solution would allow Putin to succeed in tapping him along, allow Putin to succeed in playing for time, giving Putin more time in order to try to get what he wants on the battlefield.
See, that's really interesting because there is an assumption that Donald Trump is very prepared to walk away from these talks and would suffer almost no political damage in doing so. In fact, that's almost here. It's almost assumed to be the default position now. Are you suggesting that there would be some political fallout from that and that Donald Trump is very aware of that?
Yes, I am. I think that's right. I think he is aware. President Trump, and this could be a positive characteristic, wants to win. He wants to be seen to be a winner. If he walks away, if he turns his back, if he throws up his hands, whatever the metaphor, on this problem, because Putin continues to play him, tap him, then that's not a win. That is not a win. And I think that is that will be understood, certainly by President Trump and by others as they evaluate President Trump's actions in this game.
So, and obviously I'm asking you a question that none of us could possibly know the answer to, and I'm not sure that Donald Trump knows the answer to, but what do you think is likely to happen next? In talking about come back to me in a couple of days, it seems to me that Donald Trump is still has an eye on this. He's still expecting Putin to do something within the next couple of days. What do you think the next steps from the American side might be?
On the Americans, I think President Trump has in mind what he said immediately starting the negotiations. The Russians and Ukrainians would immediately start to work out what a ceasefire would look like, how to implement those kind of things. By the way, there have been some commentary about the fact that President Trump said that this is going to have to be resolved in the end by Russians and Ukrainians. I think it's actually right. I don't think this is going to be resolved between Americans and Russians. And it shouldn't be resolved between Americans and Russians. It should be resolved between Russians and Ukrainians. That's where it has to happen. However, the Americans and the Europeans need to be there, need to press, need to push. Indeed, I think they need to push the Russians to do what they just said. That is to sit down, get serious about a ceasefire, what it looks like, how it's monitored, when it goes into effect, what the lines are, who evaluates it and identifies violations, what happens if there are violations. Those are important questions for a ceasefire. And they ought to be answered, and they ought to be answered soon.
And do you think there's a possibility of further American sanctions on Russia? I know it was something that has been discussed. There doesn't seem to be any mention of that anywhere near these two statements after the fact.
We haven't heard them from these statements coming out of this conversation today. But it is interesting, Kate, that we've got a senator, Senator Graham, Lindsey Graham, here in Washington, who's normally very close to President Trump. And he has 70 or 72 co-sponsors out of 100 senators. So a clear majority of veto.
We're Phoenix Energy, a family-owned oil company focused on unleashing American oil from North Dakota and Montana.
Russia doesn't come to the table. That's a message. I got to believe that Senator Graham is coordinated with the White House. This is not a surprise to President Trump that Senator Graham is working on this. This is to say, in answer to your question, the sanctions are still there on the table, at least in the pocket, and they can be, and I think should be put on the table.
That the Vatican may well be willing to host peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. What do you make of that?
So the new Pope has been clearer than the old Pope about how this war should end. Pope Leo has expressed his sympathy and understanding of the Ukrainian cause much more clearly than Pope Francis, number one. And number two, the Pope could use, he's volunteered. The new Pope, Pope Leo has volunteered to participate, to help. He's volunteered to be of assistance in some way to bring peace. And if he's got the moral standing to bring these two together, two Orthodox leaders in a Roman regime, that if he can bring that standing, then that could be a good thing.
And fascinating that an American Pope and an American president may well be using their both of the power that they have in this way.
It is interesting that it happens to be an American Pope and the American president who has focused on this issue, and I think has a lot at stake in this issue. And if they could work together on this to bring peace to that troubled land in a way that is lasting and just. That's the other thing about a moral force, there to be a just peace. It's not just peace at any cost, but a just, moral, lasting peace is what the two should be focused on.
William, many thanks.
All right. Let's talk about a couple other supplements before we go to Bloomberg here. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Good Night Formula. Good Night Formula has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower. This will help you to get into 3 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep. That's going to help you consolidate memory, detoxify your central nervous system, and be well rested so you'll have more energy. It's very important to have good sleep because having proper sleep, especially getting into the 3 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep, is going to help with your memory. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Good Night Formula to help with your neural health and to slow down the aging process. People that are sleep deprived chronically do age faster. Part of the reason is that they have high cortisol levels, elevated cortisol levels throughout the day. But it's not the only reason. So please go to my store and also get the vitamin B complex. If you're 40 years of age or older, it's very important to take the vitamin B complex. The first 4 B vitamins helps with mitochondrial health. So you're going to have more ATP, healthier mitochondria. That's really important for your cells. B vitamin complex helps with cellular metabolism, and B12 will help to protect your neurons. So take B12 complex, the vitamin B12 complex, very important to protect the neurons, boost up that mitochondrial health and your cellular metabolism. And again, if you're 40 years of age or older, you should be taking it every day. Stack it with the Good Night Formula, and that's a great way to improve your neural health. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the Good Night Formula and the vitamin B complex. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. Go to my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos. All right, let's go to Bloomberg. I think they're talking about the House Rules Committee vote on the tax bill.
Capitol Hill in a bid to try to get this to a full House floor vote by this Thursday. Now, importantly, in that Rules Committee, there are two fiscal hawks that sit on it that could really have some sway here, and that's Congressman Chip Roy, as well as Ralph Norman. Now, the latter has indicated that he's going to let the bill pass through rules because this is more of a procedural vote, and then that indicates to us that there likely would be a bigger conversation, a bigger fight perhaps, once that bill does make it down to the House floor in full. As I mentioned, Mike Johnson, slim margins can only afford to lose 3 Republicans on the way.
What are the Democrats doing right now?
That is a good question. They're trying to counter message this. Of course, how this worked is because they are choosing to fast track this through reconciliation. They do not need to ultimately negotiate with Democrats, but they do have to negotiate with themselves and between the chambers. We haven't even started talking about how all of this is basically going to change once the Senate gets its hands on this legislation. But Democrats really are trying to coalesce around this idea that there are going to be impacts to Medicaid. One analysis that Bloomberg News cites that when you move up those work requirements, one of the sticking points here that we could see work requirements for able-bodied adults ages 19 to 64 implemented in 2027 instead of 2029. That could potentially impact 7.7 million people when it comes to accessing their Medicaid benefits. And it is very clear that Democrats are trying to push that messaging because when you talk about that timeline moving up, that means it's going to really impact as Republicans try to campaign during the midterms. I know it seems like we're far way away from the midterms, but here in Washington, once one election ends, we really do start thinking about that next election. So Medicaid, potential impacts to Medicaid is definitely something that's coming up here on the Hill, including some of those fiscal hawks pushing for some more aggressive and controversial changes, including the acronym FMAP, which basically is the formula that the federal government uses when it allocates monies to the state to distribute those Medicaid benefits. Coming out of that meeting, some of those Republicans were asked if we're going to see any changes there, and it seems clear that President Trump does not want to touch it.
All right, Tyler, thanks so much for joining us. Tyler Kendall, a Bloomberg Television Washington correspondent. She is strategically located just outside the offices of U.S. Representative Mike Lawler down on Capitol Hill. Red headline crossing the Bloomberg terminal. U.S. set to extend Chevron's Venezuela waiver by another 60 days. That's
so it enabled them to continue to ship oil out of Venezuela. That's really been on the docket. Tons of question marks surrounding Chevron's operations there. And of course, you know what oil companies don't like? Uncertainty. That's where they're going to have to invest money. All right, coming up, David Gura sitting down with Barry Diller. This is Bloomberg.
every picture, there is a story to be explored and a path to be discovered. We're good.
Welcome back. President Trump expected on Capitol Hill this morning to persuade the GOP to unify around his big, beautiful bill, just days ahead of the House's self-imposed Memorial Day deadline. Speaker Mike Johnson meeting with SALT caucus members late last night, looking to resolve any disagreements within the party. I spoke with Georgia Congressman Richard McCormick earlier on this program about the SALT cap deduction in the last hour. Watch.
I would rather not have any salt.
Right,
but you know what? I'm willing to make a compromise to get this across the finish line.
But what do they want? They want at least 50, right?
I've heard 65. I've heard unlimited for 4 years, as if they're going to phase out 2 Congresses and a different president from now. Let's not talk about 10 years. Let's talk about next year, because that's all that matters. I hate these 10-year estimates because they never come true.
Joining me right now with an update is New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. She is the House Republican chairwoman. And Congresswoman, it's always great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. Is that what you want? You want the cap lifted to $65,000 up from the current $10,000?
No, certainly that a number of numbers have been discussed, Maria. My priority is getting this bill across the finish line. So, of course, I am one of President Trump's strongest allies and have been working to bring this to a resolution to cut taxes for all Americans, but also address this double taxation issue, which President Trump campaigned on when he campaigned in New York State. Many of our members have been working on this for over 2 years. It's an area where it would relieve taxes for hardworking families in areas where President Trump did increasingly well this last election cycle. So we are getting there. We know the importance of getting this bill across the finish line for tax cuts for all Americans, to unleash energy independence, to secure the border. So President Trump will have a warm welcome. It should not have dragged on this long, Maria. This is President Trump's top agenda item. He is the best closer there is. He is the one who is going to get this done. But certainly I've been engaged to bring this to a resolution that works for swing state New York districts, safe New York districts, and safe districts across the country.
Well, I know that when leadership first said $30,000 was where they wanted to take it, you and some of your colleagues thought that wasn't high enough.
The issue with that, Maria, is there was no discussion. There was no discussion with the members whose districts were impacted. And when you look at districts like Long Island, that was not going to be acceptable in terms of what that cap needed to be. There needs to be engagement. It needed to be earlier in the process. And certainly that's why I stepped up to bring people together with leadership to get this done. This is not going to hold up the bill. We are going to lead to deliver President Trump's one big, beautiful bill on behalf of the American people. So did I step up? You bet I did, Maria, because I know that this was with the slim majority, we have to deliver on President Trump's agenda. So we are moving towards a resolution that works for the entire House Republican Conference. And most importantly, this is important for the American people. This is what we ran on, and this is what we're going to deliver.
So, I mean, you want to get this out of the House by what? Thursday, right? Before you all leave for the Memorial Day weekend. You've got other members who aren't as concerned with SALT, but they're concerned about spending cuts, particularly as the president also wants the debt ceiling raised by $5 trillion as we approach the X date. Where are you on that? Do you think you'll be able to identify enough cuts to placate the other members who say this is not the bill that actually gets us to real spending cuts?
So this is a balancing act, Maria. You have members from all different types of districts across the country. What I believe is most important is this is President Trump's agenda. This is our one opportunity to deliver for the American people. We need to see that as the result. So this is about extending tax cuts. It's no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, unleash American energy independence, and securing the border once and for all, which President Trump has done by executive action. But we need to codify that and provide the federal funding to do so. That is what this is about. And these details, while they are important, we need to not let them get in the way from delivering on this for the American people. So these conversations, which should have happened months ago, they are happening now to bring this to a close. And that's why I think President Trump coming to Capitol Hill, he is the most important viewpoint in terms of getting this done. And members are looking forward to hearing from him directly.
All right, that's terrific. What's the most important thing you want to hear from the president today?
I think what we want to hear from the president is the importance of unifying, and Republicans are ready to step up to unify, to deliver, and then we have to work this way through the process when it comes back from the Senate, Maria. So this is one first step in this big, beautiful bill process.
Yeah, I mean, your colleagues need to understand the ramifications if this doesn't get through, and the 2026 elections, and whether or not you're going to see the Democrats take the gavel and start going all in on trying to to impeach President Trump. That's for sure, because Hakeem Jeffries as a Speaker of the House is not something I think you and your colleagues want to see. But I got to move on and get your take on other things. House Republican leaders, including yourself and John Molinar, the head of the China Select Committee, are demanding transparency from Harvard and its president, Alan Garber, following evidence of repeated collaborations between faculty and the Chinese Communist Party. The allegations include Harvard hosting members of Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps, a CCP parliamentary group, under U.S. sanctions. Why are they having a sanctioned group at Harvard? Researchers also reportedly collaborated with China-based academics on projects funded by the Iranian government, Congresswoman. So you've got the Harvard right there in the middle of supporting our two main adversaries. You'll be featured at Yeshiva University's commencement Thursday. Congratulations to you. I would love to hear that speech in the audience. But what do you want to say about all of this CCP involvement now at Harvard?
Growing your business shouldn't mean growing your overhead. Growth should be seamless with AI-driven workflows built for...
It is deeply, deeply disturbing, Maria, and this is an area where I have led in terms of oversight and accountability of these higher ed and institutions that have lost their way. We spent a lot of time talking about U.S. taxpayer dollars, but what I'm deeply concerned about is these partnerships. In addition to the abuse of U.S. taxpayer dollars, it's partnerships with our adversaries. By law, these universities have to disclose that to the Department of Education. My concerns is that they have not abided by the law and that they are pursuing partnerships with adversaries, whether it's the Iranian regime or whether it's communist China. This is not who we are. This is one of the reasons why Secretary McMahon's actions to defund and pull back those federal dollars is so incredibly important. This is a national security risk for our country and for our next generation of students. So we're going to continue to holding these universities' feet to the fire to answer these questions and make sure that this foreign influence from adversaries, that this infiltration of our higher education institutions does not continue.
Yeah, President Trump knew this years ago in the first term. Remember, the State Department indicted the Harvard professor who was actually sharing intellectual property from Harvard to the CCP. What about what we've learned this week about President Biden? The president discussed Biden's recent cancer diagnosis at the White House yesterday, telling reporters he finds the situation very sad. One of Biden's former medical advisors said that he's probably had this cancer for some time while he was the sitting president. Watch this.
You had said that very few people have it actually diagnosed at this late stage, that's rare. Doesn't it take some time for prostate cancer to develop to a point where it would spread to the bones?
Oh, he's had this for many years, maybe even a decade, growing there and spreading. That's right. It's a little surprising. He did not develop it in the last 100, 200 days.
And guess what? The first frost, you know what was happening? It had to put on their windshield wipers to get literally the oil slick off the window. That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer. And why can't, for the longest time, Delaware had the highest cancer rate in the nation.
So that was 2022 when he slipped up and said, I have cancer. Okay. And then all his aides said, oh, no, that was a slip up. No, he doesn't have cancer. I mean, I don't know. My heart goes out to him for this diagnosis. But at the same time, is this more of a cover up? All of this time, not only were we dealing with the mental challenges, but now he's had cancer this whole time. And again, they hid it from the American people and sent him out there to be president. Is it that much of an obsession not to loosen their grip on power that they would put him forward, even though they knew all of this?
Well, certainly, Maria, I share President Trump's best wishes for Joe Biden, his family. This is a horrible health situation that has impacted so many families, but it it forces the questions of there was a fundamental lack of transparency. And what's worse is I believe there was a cover-up. We know this now, that there was an absolute cover-up of the aides around President Biden, of his health records, in terms of how deeply, deeply ill-prepared and unable to complete the job of President of the United States. The President of the United States has the best doctors in the world, and yet this was never disclosed to the American people. This was hidden. It forces more questions than not of what was happening? Why was this withheld? Was it so political that they withheld this information from the American people?
Yeah.
It forces more of these questions. Again, we wish the Biden family as much healthful recovery as possible, but it opens up more questions that it is our responsibility to ask as Americans. How could this possibly have happened? And what I do think is ridiculous is now you have members of the media, not you, Maria, who were part of this cover-up, who smeared Republicans, who said that Joe Biden was not able to do this job. And now they're out there saying, oh, yes, this was ridiculous. They were part of this cover-up. I remember I had said years ago that the aides around the White House were, there could be a catastrophic health event and they would not tell the American people. That has proven to be the case, Maria. And we were smeared for saying that.
Yeah, I know you are. And we were as well, by the way. Congresswoman, real quick before you go, I want to end where I started, and that is on this SALT cap deduction. Look, you're going to run for New York governor when you're ready. We know that. You've said that you're the best candidate to take down Kathy Hochul. It really is more about the fact that taxes are too high in New York. If you run and win for governor, are you going to cut taxes?
Absolutely, Maria. And you hit the nail on the head. We are facing significant taxes in New York State. And the reality is these hardworking families, they are getting crushed. So what do Republicans do? We're trying to provide relief. But how do we get to the root cause? We lower taxes in New York State. We get our fiscal house in order. Certainly, that's a top issue no matter where I go in New York State, whether it's upstate Long Island or New York City. We are the highest tax state in the nation. They must be cut. And in the meantime, we're the ones that are talking about cutting these taxes. So yes, a new governor will cut these taxes. It's one of the reasons why we need to fire Kathy Hochul next year to save New York.
Well, not every new governor is going to cut taxes, but you said you're going to cut taxes. I mean, if it's
a Republican governor will. A Republican governor will.
Congressman, it's good to see you this morning. Thank you so much. Elise Stefanik joining us. Thank you. All right. We will be right back. Stay with us.
Don't pay.
Before we go to Bloomberg, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get these dual-purpose deodorants. They'll help to detoxify your body, and you use it as a deodorant. It's for males and females. You can get it in peppermint, lavender, and tea tree, and also in citrus. Get a couple bars for your household. Very important to take. It has no aluminum and no baking soda. It's made from essential oils from the Himalayas. Extremely high quality deodorants that will help to detoxify your body. Regularly detoxifying your body is going to help with your immune system and your endocrine system. So it's very important. Now let me talk about the stack that's actually going to help your cardiovascular health and your bone density. Let's talk about the cardiovascular side to this first. Taking D3 and K2 together is very important. So vitamin D3 and K2. And this K2 vitamin is the MK7 molecule. Now, stack them together, and when you stack these together, the K2 and the D3, and you do this every day, what you're going to be able to do is just pull out some of that calcium that's been depositing around your plaque in your vascular system and reduce the chances of further calcium depositing. It's important to take magnesium to increase the efficacy of D3. Now, if you stack it also with the nattokinase is fibrinolytic and will help to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. That's going to help with your cardiovascular system and reduce the chances of plaque formation. So stack the nattokinase, the D3, and the K2 together. That's a great stack. But let's talk about bone health now. Bone health is really important. And you need to do resistance training and do these vibration exercises that I've mentioned in previous episodes. Take the K2 and the D3, do the resistance training, taking calcium,
Make sure you're taking magnesium in your diet and your supplementation to increase the efficacy of D3. And you will start to build higher bone density. Very important. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the D3, the K2, and the natto kinase. Now, let's talk about neurohealth. Neurohealth is really important, especially when you turn age 40. So if you're 40 years of age or older, you need to start taking ubiquinol. Ubiquinol is the most bioavailable form of CoQ10 that you can get. Most people that take CoQ10, you're taking the wrong type. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the most bioavailable form of CoQ10 that you can purchase on my store. It's ubiquinol. Take it every day, and it's going to soak up free radicals. It's going to help your mitochondrial health. It's going to boost up your energy levels and protect your neurons. Extremely important. And stack it with NAD+. NAD+ is a supplement that will boost up your NAD+ levels. And that will increase your energy, help to repair your DNA damage. When you get older, you start to accumulate DNA damage. We have repair mechanisms in our cells that help to repair that DNA damage. But because of the accumulation that takes place when you get older, it's hard for the body to repair it. NAD+ helps to repair that DNA damage, cellular DNA and mitochondrial DNA. And NAD+ is neuroprotective. It'll help to protect your neurons. Stack it with ubiquinol. Another great stack would be ubiquinol, NAD+ and C60, or resveratrol, or even Clarity Factor. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. Let's go to Fox Business talking about the tax bill. This is an opinion from Kevin O'Leary.
Let's talk salary.
Great. What do you typically offer for this role?
It's competitive.
And if it was a number, it would be...
Hey.
Well, what's going to happen is there are going to be a lot of trade deals, and there's going to be clarity on the tax cuts, and then firms are going to lift off. But think about it. Even before that happened, we're getting really strong jobs numbers. First quarter capital equipment investment was north of 20%, one of the best quarters ever, because all of America knows that the golden age is coming and we got to start building stuff before everybody else gets in front of us. And so I think that you're going to look at a second half of the year that's way, way north of 3%, probably north of 4%, to give us one of the better years we've ever had. Because even with the uncertainty that you talk about, that I've written widely about over the last 25 years, even with that uncertainty, we've got strong jobs numbers and strong investment. And so once the uncertainty is lowered, then a liftoff from there is really going to be something to see.
National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett with me yesterday on this program, predicting 4% plus growth in the U.S. economy in the second half of this year. Joining me now is O'Leary Ventures Chairman Kevin O'Leary. Kevin, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. And in the past, you've raised some concerns about the direction of the U.S. economy. What is your reaction to what you just heard from Kevin Hassett?
Well, I like to be an optimist, and 4% would be spectacular.
Yeah.
It would be absolutely phenomenal. Now, I don't know if we're going to get there, but he did bring up the tariff issues. And the way I look at the tariff deal is we've got this date of July 9th, and that's when the 90-day freeze, particularly on the China package, comes off. Will we have resolution by then? And what I mean by that, Maria, is what I think is happening here, because the tariffs are all over the map. I mean, the Canadians just dropped their tariffs practically to zero, and yet we still have tariffs on them. The European thing is in flux. Of course, we've got the Japanese situation, the Indian. I'd like to see resolution to all of this at whatever the reciprocal rate's going to be. And the way I look at it, and I think the way the market's starting to look at it, given the recovery we've had, maybe we're going to a place where reciprocal platform is around 10%, which effectively becomes a value-added tax on America, a consumption tax, like every other country has. We've been never able to pass a consumption tax through Congress, but if we call it a tariff, it seems to be able to work. So if that's where we're going, the market's going to be okay with that, because there's so many countries around the world and economies that function very well between 7% and 14% consumption taxes. If that's where we're going, he could be right. But if it's more chaos and more 145 and the China package is on its own an issue around IP law and everything else, we got a lot of moving parts here. But right now, the market's willing to give the administration the benefit of the doubt.
Well, because President Trump has been right. I mean, you know it. You've talked about China and its bad behavior. How else is he going to move the needle on this bad behavior, these non-tariff barriers? But look, you recently said that the president's big, beautiful bill is a disaster for small business. Why?
Very simple. You remember the PPP and ERC programs. They were the only bills available during the pandemic to small business. All the other bills, like the CHIPS and Science Act, the infrastructure bill, all of that, there wasn't a dime in there for small business. And there are millions of small businesses in America. And they drew down the PPP and the ERC to stay alive and keep their employees employed. And it worked. Now, we've got a situation in this new beautiful bill, and I don't think anybody reads these things. I read it. I read all these bills through the eyes of small business. And I found a section in there that looks like a cut and paste that says the IRS will get extended powers to audit small businesses for up to 9 years that took the ERC. Now, that is going to cause chaos in valuations. If you have that hanging over your head, it almost seems unfair and un-American to do that to small business. And I'm not sure everybody's aware of this provision in the bill. I'm heading down tonight to the Hill to get a gong and walk down the halls banging it, saying, what are you guys doing here? You can't do that to small business. Somebody should fix this in the big, beautiful bill, because it's not beautiful for small business. That's totally unfair, because if you're trying to do a deal or get financing or raise capital, and you know you've got that uncertainty for 9 years, that's going to cause chaos.
Well, look, we've had Kelly Loeffler on this program, the head of the small business, and she's talked all about supporting small business. Are you telling me that there's nothing in the bill that supports small business?
No, I'm telling you, Maria, there's a provision in here that hurts small business, and it really will be devastating to them. And I don't know how it got in there. It could have been a cut and paste from a previous bill. But whatever it is, somebody's got to raise the red flag, and I'm going to do it, because this is not good. You know, small business creates 62% of jobs, and every small business in my portfolio has called me and said, what the hell is this? Where did this come from? Of course I took ERC because I had to stay alive, and now they're punishing me for it. I understand, Maria, there was fraud in the ERC, as there's fraud in every government program, but to punish every small business in America this way makes absolutely no sense. And I'm very optimistic that this will get fixed before this big, beautiful bill passes. I don't think enough people know about this, and I thank you for bringing it up, because this is a huge problem.
Well, look, I didn't bring it up. You brought it up. But I want to say this. What I am going to bring up is this. There's increased loan approvals and lending activity. The SBA has seen a significant increase in loan approvals under Kelly Loeffler. 80% increase in loan approvals, okay? So they're trying to move things forward faster. You've got this focus on deregulation. They're taking red tape out so that small business can move forward. They want to extend the tax cuts so that small business can get tax cuts there. They're trying to streamline and reorganize the SBA, and they want to get a focus on American manufacturing and bringing supply chains back to America. So for you to sit here and tell me that there's nothing in here for small business and that small business is getting screwed in the big, beautiful bill, I just don't see it. However, I will look at what you're talking about in terms of the IRS.
I agree with all of those provisions, but the one that's overhanging that really, really hurts is giving more power to the IRS to cause conflict with small business. Who wants to do that? What Republican wants to give more power?
I don't like that. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, well then let's agree on that. But everything else, I applaud any support for small business. And right now, with rates over 7% on mortgages, it's really important to give them these. But this overhanging war on small business from the IRS, that's got to go.
Okay. I want to get your take before you go on China, because did you see what happened with cattle? Shares of the Chinese battery company soaring in Hong Kong, up 16%. Now it's the largest equity offering so far this year, Kevin. You and I have had this discussion about all those Chinese stocks traded on US exchanges. That's another economic lever for President Trump to pull. He hasn't gone there yet. We know that would be death for the Chinese Communist Party to actually see those Chinese stocks get off of U.S. exchanges, because that ends their funding by American investors. That's why cattle went public in Hong Kong. Your reaction?
Look, I agree. They have to go attract capital wherever they can get it. But at the end of the day, the biggest market still remains the United States of America.
yeah.
Not only for the purchase of batteries, but also for capital markets. So that has to get resolved. But I will say one thing. Most of us that are investors, and in small business and large, want to do business with the Chinese people. It's a massive market. We want that deal done. We just want to protect our IP. We want access to the legal system to resolve trade disputes. I'm a China hawk. I said, let's go 400% so we have an embargo until this gets worked out.
Yeah.
The China package is different than all the rest of the tariffs. We've talked about that quite a bit. I really want this China deal done so that opens up the markets. Let us compete on a level playing field, and it'll be great.
What did you think about the stablecoin legislation? The Senate advanced this landmark stablecoin legislation late last night. We weren't sure. For a minute there, I thought it was, dead on arrival. 16 Democrats flipped after ethics standards for government employees and limits for tech companies issuing stablecoins were included in the bill. Democrat Senator Mark Warner, one of the 16 to flip, said that the latest bill is not perfect, but the U.S. cannot afford to keep standing on the sidelines. This now legislation moves to the Senate floor for debate, with the final vote happening as early as Friday. Kevin, you and I have spoken in the past about the banks and whether or not they were complicit. Maybe they don't want legislation to move forward. The Genius Act, they didn't want that to move forward because maybe it infringes on their own business.
This is a groundbreaking move. Congratulations to Haggerty, 66 votes. It now goes to the Senate. Thune, I hope, can bring it before the break. We don't know yet. But this is so important for us to be competitive in digital payment systems around the world. And I know what happened on the flips. I'm sure Schumer had something to do with this. He basically said, look, I don't want to give them a 2/3. I'm going to let them get it through, but I want to hold back on a partisan basis. That's probably what occurred. But still, 66 is enough. It's good enough. And this bill is relatively clean. It's a groundbreaker for crypto, because once we get this passed, this is not Bitcoin. This is just digital payment systems, but it does assure us that the U.S. dollar becomes the de facto currency around the world for price discovery on commodities. Who doesn't want that?
That's
Elizabeth Warren tried very hard to shut it down.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the olive leaf extract. It is a dual purpose supplement. It's going to help boost up your immune system and help with your cardiovascular system. It brings down inflammation and helps your lipid profile. Take it every day. Very important. Turmeric is an antioxidant. It's going to soak up free radicals, and it's going to bring down inflammation. That's important for your vascular system and your immune system. And ashwagandha root is very important. It helps to control your cortisol levels and your blood glucose levels. That will bring down inflammation. It's going to help your immune system and your cardiovascular system. Very important. A lot of people don't realize that if you have high levels of glucose, that's inflammatory at the vascular level. And if you have chronic levels of cortisol, that's actually immunosuppressive. So it's very important to take ashwagandha root, help with your immune system and your vascular system. Stacking these is a very powerful stack. So stack ashwagandha root with turmeric and olive leaf extract, and that will give you that dual purpose targeting for your immune system and your cardiovascular system. There are a lot of places in the world, especially in the United States, that have poor air quality. So if you start to have, throughout the day, some irritation in your throat because of the poor air quality in your air environment, take the lozenges and the drops that I have. They're made from structural nanosilver, and it's going to help your immune system. But not just air quality, allergy season and the cold season. You want to mitigate that irritation in your throat right away so it doesn't fester. So I have in stock elderberry zinc lozenges in a 21 count. So get a few bags for your household for the elderberry zinc. And I also have 3 different flavors for the drops, which is in a 100 count for each bag. You can get it in honey and lemon, in cherry flavor, and also in blueberry. Get a few bags for your household, help support my work, and help support your health. Like I said, the moment you start having that irritation in your throat, it's very important to mitigate it right away and boost up that immune system. Please go to my store, get the lozenges and the drops. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order.
Gold up $49 the ounce, up 1.5%. Spot gold now at $32.79. West Texas Intermediate crude 62.23 a barrel, down 0.7%. Joe mentioned Tesla up 1.8%. Elon Musk saying he is committed to being the Tesla CEO in 5 years. And speaking of the Qatar Economic Forum 2025, he told our Michal Hussein he is seeing no problem with demand, while adding that Tesla lost sales on the left, but also gained on the right. And he talked about acts of violence committed against the automaker and owners of Tesla vehicles.
I'm not someone who's ever committed violence, and yet massive violence was committed against my companies. Massive violence was threatened against me. Who are these people? Why would they do that? How wrong can they be? They're on the wrong side of history, and that's an evil thing to do.
Tesla CEO Elon Musk in a conversation carried live on Bloomberg Radio. Tesla shares up 1.8%, and Apple just getting word preparing to allow third-party developers to write software using its AI models. Apple today down by 0.5%. Recapping stocks lower, S&P down 22, drop there of 0.4%. Balance of power continues right now. Back we go to Washington. Once again, your host, here he is, Joe Matthew.
All right, Charlie, good to see you, my friend, and thank you so much for the update. We'll get back to Charlie Pellet, the voice of Wall Street and the New York subway, a little bit later on this hour to check on the Tuesday trade. Thanks for being here on the Tuesday edition of Balance of Power. Here we go again, high noon on the East Coast, with a lot to report and a lot to talk about. It's been a doozy of a day already, and it's not even half over here in the nation's capital as we bring you live coverage on Bloomberg Radio, satellite radio channel 121, and of course on YouTube. Meet us now because we're about to show you something really cool. Tyler Kendall's got a little gift for you. Going to bring you behind the scenes on Capitol Hill. Search Bloomberg Business News Live, and you'll add our cameras to our microphones. Great to be as well on Bloomberg Originals as we cover every platform on the planet here on the fastest show in politics, because we've got a lot to bring to you. It's not every day the parents show up at the party, but it happened a short time ago. First thing this morning, Donald Trump, as promised, on Capitol Hill to do some cajoling, you might say, twist some arms, whatever you want to call it, to get the bill passed, knowing that there are grandstanders, as he likes to call them, actual lawmakers, members of his own Republican Party who don't love what they're seeing in this legislation. And this is the signature achievement, or so they want to claim, extending the Trump tax cuts, of course, cutting spending on the federal level and doing so much when it comes to no taxes on tips, overtime, and the rest. Then there's SALT. We're going to get to that in a moment. That's where Tyler comes in. But let's listen to President Trump, by the way. Four gaggles in 2 hours. Producer James counting for us. Here's the boss on the way in.
Well, it's not a question of holdouts. We have a tremendously unified party. I don't think we've ever had a party like this. There's some people that want a couple of things that maybe I don't like or that they're not going to get. I think we're a very unified party. The Senate's doing great. John Thune is doing fantastically. He's a great guy. And we're going to have a bill, the one big, beautiful bill. I think it's going to be it's the biggest bill ever passed, and we got to get it done.
Well, it may not have been one big, beautiful meeting when they went behind closed doors. The headline on the terminal, Trump pushes SALT Republicans to abandon further cap hikes. That's not what people like Mike Lawler want to hear today. If you're a Republican from New York, you've got a lot on the line. And that's why, as I promised you, Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall is going to bring us behind the scenes now, not into an area of the Capitol that you see a lot. She's actually outside Congressman Lawler's office in the Cannon House office building, having spoken with him a short time ago. Tyler, it's pretty clear, says as it stands right now, he doesn't support the bill.
Yeah, hey, Joe. At this moment, he says that he will not budge on his vote. Now, going into this closed-door meeting with President Trump, we had an idea that it was going to be pretty contentious, considering that President Trump told us reporters that he doesn't really think that there needs to be much changes when it comes to SALT, making it a political issue, saying that it will benefit tax policies in these blue states. But I had the chance to catch up with Congressman Mike Lawler here, taking you here really to the center of the action, which for our radio listeners happens to be an empty hallway at the moment. But really, this is where we are going to start to see a lot of the negotiations happen, because House Speaker Mike Johnson needs to get these states like New York, New Jersey, and California on board in order to pass this reconciliation package. Now, Mike Lawler told me that he made his point to President Trump pretty clear that lifting the cap to $30,000 from the current $10,000 limit is not going to be enough. He told me that ultimately he respects the president's perspective on this and that he wants to get a bill passed so that the tax cuts do not expire, because that's what's going to happen at the end of the day if they do not pass new tax cut legislation, but that they need to come to an agreement. He said it's going to be up to House leadership whether or not they can get this deal done by House Speaker Mike Johnson's stated goal of Memorial Day, but that House leadership is going to have to put pen to paper, as he said, in order to get a better deal, Joe.
Wow, amazing. Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall with the very latest. Great get, Tyler. Thank you for bringing that to our viewers and listeners. It's amazing. See that? Tyler Kendall shows up. Everybody goes inside their office and closes the door. That's something Mike Dorning knows a little bit about, having covered Capitol Hill for a long time. And we want to add the voice of our Capitol Influence deputy team leader. You know him as Mike Dorning. It's great to see you.
Great to
Mike,
be here.
in the throes of all of this, and I know you're real busy in the newsroom right now. Donald
Doing a
Trump
lot of
says,
typing.
we couldn't even get you on the phone. That was a meeting of love, he said. There was no shouting, despite reports to the contrary. I'm not losing patience, he said. Anyone who told you that is a liar. When you have to say I'm not losing patience out
And you
loud,
are losing patience.
what do you
yes.
think of this?
So it's a tense period. There are people who have important bottom line considerations. This is tough to work out, but there's not much doubt that basically all the Republicans are very supportive of the core provisions. They want the big tax cuts. They want the investment-oriented, business-oriented tax cuts. So we know this is going to 99% certain get done. The drama here is there's all these fights happening right now, and it could delay it. And if you care about the SALT deduction, if you care about Medicaid, if you care about how big the deficit is, if you care about these green energy tax breaks, these big stakes are going to be decided by this fighting. And especially if you care about the SALT deduction, this is the last shot to raise it, because none of those Senate Republicans care one whit about this. Unlike in the House, where you have Republican representatives from high tax states like New York, New Jersey, California, in the Senate, there are no Senate Republicans who care about those states.
Well, that means a lot. So it's a lonely world if you're Mike Lawler right now or Nick
This is
Lolota.
your last stand.
This is it. Sure.
If you're them.
So what really happened in that meeting based on the leaks and our reporting?
So even though it doesn't really matter to you and me whether this thing gets done until December 31st, if you're a Republican, you want to get it done now before, maybe Trump turns unpopular if there's inflation. Maybe some Republican lawmakers keel over and die. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. When you can get it done, you want it done. And Trump and Mike Johnson have this artificial deadline they've created, Memorial Day, to get it through the House. And that is the way to get stuff done in Congress, is to have a deadline. And even if it's a made up one, make it feel like that's the moment, because no one's going to give their best offer until you're right up on the line.
Yeah.
And these guys all have strong opinions about what they want, but they also everyone wants to get a deal.
Of course. Well, if they stay on track here, let's say it gets through Rules Committee at 1 a.m. or whatever this plan is, and then a floor vote, it appears that lawmakers will not have a CBO score to base their vote on. I don't know how unusual that is for the Congressional Budget Office to not have this ready, but does that actually strengthen the hand of Republican leadership to not actually put a number on how expensive this is?
It kind of does, because you've got, this is going to be like hugely big deficit addition,
Moody's,
like
right?
trillions of dollars added to the deficit. The U.S. debt just got downgraded by the last major rating agency. You even had this great story on the Bloomberg terminal moment about Hong Kong pension funds suddenly might not even be able to invest in U.S. government debt anymore because it doesn't meet legal credit, minimums. So you've got all these things going on that might make the debt seem like a bigger deal. But if you can get it through without like all that, it helps.
Wow, amazing. I haven't even asked you about the debt limit yet. At some point, an X date is going to drop. Does that light the fires to complete this process? Because, there'll be outrage in our remaining minute here by House members when they see what comes back from the upper chamber.
Yeah, there will be outrage. And that's why they want to keep the debt limit paired to this.
Yes.
There's no actual reason why they have to. They can, under the reconciliation legislation, pass a debt limit in August and wait to do the tax stuff in October like they did last time around, or even like Christmas Eve. But by keeping that debt limit attached to it, then you have this default on the debt that can create this sense of crisis that you have to get the whole thing done now. Yeah. And that creates kind of a deadline for August vacation. And the members like going on vacation in August.
We do as well, don't we?
I do.
Could they get that done for us? It would be amazing. Mike, thank you so much. Dropping everything in the newsroom for us. That's team.
All right. While they're going to commercial break, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the collagen. The collagen is a supplement that you take every day. You get a big scooper. It's a powder. Mix it with soft foods, filtered water, milk, or a smoothie. Take it every day. Do resistance training. It'll help with your musculature, your joint health, your cartilage, and your bone health. Take it every day. It'll also help with your skin, your nails, and your hair. So please go to my store. Take the collagen every day. It's about a month's supply. And help with your musculature, your joint health, your bones, your cartilage, your skin, hair, and nails. Now let's talk about the first pillar of my core protocol, which is taking Max 35, Max 14, or Cleanse. Max 35 is 35 parts per million. Max 14 is 14 parts per million. And Cleanse is 30 parts per million. You take a teaspoon a day, you swish it in your mouth and gargle about 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and then swallow. What will happen is that you are boosting up your immune system by improving your epithelial lining and your mucosal barrier in your oral pharynx and in your oral cavity. That's very important. So take it every day. I've been doing this for over 5 years. Take a teaspoon a day, every day. If you're not feeling well, take a tablespoon or 2 a day, and then go back to your maintenance dose once you start feeling better. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Max 35 or 14 or Cleanse, and add that to your daily protocol. Another great supplement that I have that's really important to take if you're 40 years of age or older is Myotrol. Myotrol will help you to build muscle. When you get older, your genes start to methylate and you can't produce the same type of gene expression as when you were younger, right? Your gene expression changes over time. It's part of the aging process. But you can take supplements to slow down that methylation and also to help with gene expression of certain genes that are starting to decline in expression. Myotrol will help to express genes that will build muscle and maintain muscle. Myotrol is made with flavonoids, polyphenols, and lignans. It's going to bring down inflammation and also help you to recover after a workout. But make sure you do resistance training and take the Myotrol every day. Stack it with Gladiator barley for max benefit, because the Gladiator barley is a high density protein that will help to build the muscle
And the Myotrol will help with the gene expression to build the muscle and to maintain the muscle. Myotrol also helps with your mitochondrial health. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Make sure you take the Myotrol if you're 40 years of age or older, and make sure you do resistance training. If you're an athlete, younger or older, you would benefit from Myotrol also. So take it if you're an athlete, younger or older, or if you're 40 years of age and you're not an athlete, take Myotrol.
You've got the S&P trading lower, down 23, drop there of 0.4%. Of 1%, and NASDAQ is lower by 72, down now by 0.4%. Again, keeping it all in context, we've got the S&P down 0.4%. Bloomberg Mag 7 index down 0.2%. The 10-year currently yielding 4.48%. The 2-year 3.95%. Gold is up 1.6%. Spot gold 32.81 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.3%, 62.48 a barrel, and Bitcoin a little changed on the day at 105,491. Amazon Zoox is expanding testing of its autonomous driving technology to Atlanta, moving in on a market where Alphabet's Waymo is expanding with Uber technologies. Amazon shares down 1.9%, Uber up now by 0.7%. And just getting word from Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum that 2 close aides of Mexico City Mayor Clara Briguda have been shot dead by assailants on a motorbike. The statement posted by Exxon Briguda did not clarify whether the mayor was the intended target. Again, recapping, stocks lower. S&P right now down by 0.4%. Balance of power continues now. Back we go to Washington. Once again, your host. Here he is, Joe Mack.
Charlie Pellet with not only the markets, but the headlines. You never know what you're going to hear from Charlie, which is why you need to stay with us always on the fastest show in politics. Charlie holding forth at world headquarters in New York, watching the markets. Of course, we'll get back to Charlie for more on the Tuesday trade coming up. Your investors kind of curious about what the heck is going on in Washington today. President Trump spending hours now on Capitol Hill trying to light some fires underneath this bill. If you hear him speak, and by the way, we heard him talk a lot. I mean, 4 gaggles in one morning is impressive. He had the speaker with him in tow, Mike Johnson. And this was a closed-door meeting with the Republican conference here. President looking specifically at the salty Republicans, not just those in the Freedom Caucus who are pushing back on this, but the Mike Lawlers of the world, who Tyler Kendall was talking to a short time ago. There are no votes unless they get a higher cap. Reportedly, President Trump not hearing of this. He wants them to back off and start voting. It's not what
I think we have unbelievable unity. I think we're going to get everything we want. And I think we're going to have a great victory. And this man has done a great job. And I think this was a tremendous session.
Okay. A meeting of love, he said. What was the quote there? Unbelievable unity. Apparently, though, there was shouting in the room. And some Republican lawmakers left thinking that they're going to vote no on this if it gets to the floor later this week. Now, we need to talk to a grown-up about this because it's kind of hard to find one at the moment in Washington. And, of course, there's only one man who's running odds on this and is wearing a fleece vest right now. That's Nathan Dean, Bloomberg Intelligence senior U.S. policy analyst. He will hold us in his arms and walk us through this complicated mess. Great to see you. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me, as always.
Now, a little inside baseball here, because this whole show is inside baseball, at least in Washington. They have moved the people who run this program, the people who are balance of power, they have moved us in the newsroom to Nathan Dean's row, physically moved us. So we're suddenly outclassed in the newsroom by the smartest analysts in Washington. But for me, it's a treat because I get a front row seat to what we always talk about here, the phone calls that come into Nathan's desk and the many seminars, I guess, if I call them that you're holding with clients who have terminals who want to know what in the world is going on in Washington. You always help make sense of this. So this is your chance now for our viewers and listeners, because it looks like this bill might be falling apart, is it?
Well, what we'll just say is, look, this was anticipated. I mean, there's been a lot of momentum from the Republicans just to keep things moving, and they've done a great job at doing this. But eventually they have to make hard choices. And it's like that little, toy that my son brought home from the carnival that I've been trying to get rid of, where you squeeze one side and it gets bigger on the other. If you come down and squeeze too hard on Medicaid, you lose votes. Right. If you come down and squeeze too hard on the Salt Caucus, you lose votes. And so there's always going to be a point where Speaker Johnson has to actually get everybody in the room. And they tried that today.
They did.
And it looks like it didn't work. So, Speaker Johnson wants to have this wrapped up by this Friday, wants to go home for the Memorial Day break. I'm not sure they can do that. But I will say is that I do think eventually the House will pass this, call it either this week or next week, and then it goes to the Senate.
Yes.
The biggest issue, and this is what we tell our clients at the end of the day, is the Senate is always going to do what they do. And that means that they are going to take that thing from the House. They're going to say, thank you very much. They're going to throw it over their shoulder, and they're going to send the House back what they want to do. And we're going to have to go through this all again. So the negotiations that are taking place this week probably are going to be moot in a couple weeks.
But that's why people from outside the bubble looking in say, well, what is the point of all this arguing around the edges when they know it's going to get hacked up by the Senate? This argument happening this week is basically
is able to deliver this weekend or this week, then you can only afford to lose 3 votes. Right. And President Trump was going after Representative Massey pretty harshly today in terms of trying to convince those voters to come back. But I will just say is that, Representative Johnson has done a good job of trying to keep unity to this point. Mm-hmm. But I'll just say that, they are going to have to keep this momentum going or else everything derails. And we still think, you talked about odds, 70% chance of this passing in the July timeframe.
Okay, so by July 4th, is that where we're calling 70?
I still
think
it's
the best timeline, right?
I still think it's going to come after the 4th of July.
Okay.
But definitely before August recess because the debt ceiling is still included.
Right.
And our chief rate strategist, Ira Jersey, has his X date of August.
Yes.
So I do think that they get this done, but I'm not sure it's in time.
With the debt limit included.
With the debt limit included. I'm just not sure it's in time for the 4th of July barbecues.
Okay, fair enough. Now, but this conference committee is going to be like a civil war inside the Republican Party, though, right? What happens when it comes back from the Senate? Because you don't seem too worried about that. Does the House just pass whatever it gets?
So I think there's 2 holdouts. Obviously, you can say moderates and you can say fiscal hawks.
Yeah.
Let's look at the moderates and let's look at the Salt Caucus. For Representative Lawler's position, I think if I'm Representative Lawler, and obviously I'm just making this up, it's much more important to me to get a SALT deal done than it is to go back to my constituents and say, I can only get you from 10,000 to 30,000 with an income phase out. To me, that says that I am a real risk of losing a district which won, Senator Gillibrand won 55 to 45. Yeah. From the fiscal hawks perspective, President Trump used the bully pulpit to go against them in March when it came to the funding fight. And they probably won't have the same primary threat, 18 months from now. Mm-hmm. So they may live from another day. So I do think the moderates ultimately win this one out. And that's why we think that the deficit most likely will increase as a result of this.
And there's going to be a higher SALT cap. If your moderates are happy, you're a Republican from New York.
Everybody keeps talking about that 40,000 individual, 80,000 for joint.
Is that where it ends?
I could see that's where probably is good enough. But again,
Nick LaLota wasn't hearing about it when we had him on the air a couple of times, or at least wasn't endorsing it, suggesting that this could be he said, hey, you let the whole thing expire. There's no cap at all.
Well, if you talk to Matt Miller, he doesn't want a cap. So, it's one of those things where I think they're going to have to do something to get to their constituents and say, we fought for you. And I think that 40-80 level is enough. But again, we'll see.
Is Matt Miller part of the SALT lexicon now in Washington? Is that a thing? Is Matt listening? Can we get him to call in or something? We're invoking you when you're not in the room when it comes to this debate, because Matt is the face of this voter living in a place like New York, super high property taxes, wants a break because he knows how much New York contributes to the other states. Right? That's the argument against this being some sort of blue state giveaway.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would just go back and say, this isn't all that expensive. I mean, when you're talking about a $5 trillion bill, and also if you take into account the Senate, call it the Senate idea of assuming that the current cost of policy is 0, you don't need to actually increase the deficit all that much for this SALT taste, if you will. Mm-hmm. But on the flip side, if I'm a representative from Oklahoma or Kansas or whatever, it could be seen politically as giving a handout to blue states, or President Trump mentioned today, a benefit to Democratic governors.
Right.
And so, there's a lot of different messages on this one.
What a line.
But I think at the end of the day, the Representative Lawlers of the world will most likely hold their guns. Well, I think the deficit hawks may actually adhere to President Trump.
So who brings all these naysayers to Jesus at some point? If that meeting didn't work today, how do you get the SALT Republicans, the Freedom Caucus? Andy Ogles apparently is is squawking now about this. You could have as many, you said Tom Massey, that could be as many as 10 no's.
I think Speaker Johnson brings everybody together, whether it's this week or next week. Speaker Johnson brings everybody together and says to the message, look, we know the Senate is going to change something, but let's not derail this message so that let's not go into the August recess without something. If we want the Senate to get something back to the House sooner rather than later, let's go forward. And this is what happened in the House Budget Committee on Sunday night, where we had 4 presents, not ayes,
right,
just to keep the momentum going. I think that message may play out.
Does that happen in rules tonight, assuming this committee comes together? We get more present votes?
I think so.
Chip Roy, Ralph Norman, and so on?
Maybe. I mean, I heard, there was some discussion that Representative Norman may actually be somewhat okay with that. I don't know if that means it's an aye or a present, but,
sure.
I don't think the House
And
Rules
then take it out on the floor.
Correct. I think, look, this fight is going to the floor no matter what. If I'm awake at 1 o'clock in the morning this morning, my job is, and I'm one of these members, my job is to get home, get some sleep, because the bigger fight's coming later.
Producer James is getting up at 1 o'clock in the morning to watch that for us. He's going to have the whole thing time-coded when I wake up tomorrow. There will be some drama in that room, presumably, and in the end, there will be Republicans who vote no on the floor. Maybe a couple. Chip Roy, Tom Massey, what do you think?
I think so.
Can they get away with that?
But again, the margin, I think, is it voting no? Is it voting present? We still don't know. And, when you can only lose 3 to 4 votes, it's like the margins are that tight, which is why I've always thought the Memorial Day was too quick. But, I may be wrong.
You know what happened? Pretty remarkable. Stablecoin. The Genius Act moves ahead in the Senate. And we saw a surprising number of Democrats get behind this bill. What's next for it?
So obviously it passed cloture last night. 16 Democrats went with it. So it was a 66-32 vote. And this was a major victory for the crypto world because you were able to bypass that filibuster. I think the full Senate vote is later this week, maybe next week. Senator John Thune was hinting at later this week. And then it goes to the House, where I don't think there's going to be much opposition because this is a bipartisan issue and the Senate was always going to be the major hurdle. Now that it's passed the Senate, I think this bill becomes law in June or July.
Okay, you told us this was going to happen. Does it unlock a conversation or legislation on a broader crypto bill, or is this all we get this year?
I'm somewhat optimistic on this broader crypto bill, but this bill passing does make that harder because
makes it harder.
Yes, because there was a lot of discussion, especially from Senator Elizabeth Warren, on President Trump's involvement in the crypto space, and the technical amendments that the Democrats got in these negotiations over the last couple of days wasn't all that much. So I could easily see the Democrats saying, look, there's a lot more work to do here on this broader.
Well, this is an interesting turn for Democrats here. So the White House's embrace of crypto, which has inspired crypto investors around the country, has lifted Bitcoin beyond $100,000, is in fact what will keep this legislation, this framework, from becoming law.
It's a hiccup. I wouldn't say that it's going to keep it, but it's a hiccup.
But it's a turnoff for Democrats.
For some. But I will say that, look, we saw 16 Democrats go for this. Recognizes that there is a regulatory framework, or this was in a regulatory void. But you have SEC Chairman Paula Atkins going out there last week or the week before saying, look, we don't need Congress to do this. We have the authorities. You know who also said that? Gary Gensler.
Oh, man. I love that. He even timed it out. Nathan Dean, we miss you. I'll see you next week, I hope, if not sooner. Bloomberg Intelligence, if you have a terminal, he's there to answer.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great supplements that I offer and stack them the way I'm telling you to stack them. Let's talk about the supplement Heirloom Barley. Heirloom Barley will help to detoxify your body, soak up free radicals with superoxide dismutase, and bring down inflammation. Very important for your vascular health, for your immune system, for working out in that recovery, for problems with joints. Some people have arthritis. Bringing down inflammation will help with that. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Heirloom Barley. This is a high-density protein. You get a big scooper, take a half a scoop or a full scoop each day, mix it with soft foods like hummus, yogurt, applesauce. You mix it with filtered water or with milk. Some people put it in a smoothie. But take it every day, typically for your breakfast or for your lunch. And also take a look at the stack that's going to help with youthful gene expression, help with your cardiovascular health, and also help with your brain function. Let's talk about the brain function first. Clarity Factor. Clarity Factor is going to get rid of brain fog. It's going to help you concentrate on tasks at work or in school, or even if you're retired. They'll allow you to concentrate. They'll also help with get those neurons firing. When you get those neurons firing, you're going to have positive neuroplasticity. And if you apply a holistic approach, proper diet, proper exercise, proper supplementation, learning new things, what's going to happen is you're going to have improved brain function and brain health. So take Clarity Factor every day. This is going to help support your memory. You should be taking it every day, and drink it with filtered water. Now, taking omega-3 on top of that is going to help with your cardiovascular health. Omega-3 brings down systemic inflammation. It also helps to prevent red blood cells from over sticking and creating clots. So it helps with clot form, preventing overclotting. And omega-3 helps to bring down the LDL levels and bring up your HDL levels. So you're reducing the chances of oxidized LDL, which means that you're reducing the chances of plaque buildup in your vascular system. Taking omega-3 is really important for your cardiovascular health. And resveratrol. Resveratrol is something I've been taking for decades. It's going to help with your mitochondrial health. It's going to boost up your energy levels. It's also going to allow you to get rid of senescent cells. It helps with youthful gene expression, and it's going to soak up free radicals. Stack it with the omega-3 and the Clarity Factor. And what this stack's going to do, is allow you to focus on brain function, cardiovascular health, and youthful gene expression. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get this stack. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off. Also take a look at that heirloom barley. Use that every day to detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals with superoxide dismutase.
AI coding is changing business forever.
Along here at Bloomberg, we've got U.S. stocks taking a breather. Traders are waiting after a 6-day run to put the S&P 500 up almost 20% from its April lows. Give back though today with the S&P down 17 right now at 59.45. Drop there of 0.3%. The Dow lower by 125, also down 0.3%. NASDAQ Composite Index down 43, a drop there of 0.2%. The 10-year 4.48%, the 2-year 3.96%. Gold up $48 the ounce, higher now by 1.5%. West Texas Intermediate crude down 9 cents a barrel, little change, 62.60 on WTI, and Bitcoin also little changed at 105,448. As for the market backdrop, tariffs and trade, Amanda Lynham is head of macro credit research at BlackRock Financial Management.
I actually thought it was really notable that Atlanta Fed President Raphael Bostic said to Mike McKee yesterday that he was watching corporates signaling in his discussions around his district. And so that company level commentary in real time, I think, is going to be key. And I think it really does boil down to the forward path for trade policy and then some of these other incremental policies on the margin.
BlackRock's Amanda Lynham. Goldman Sachs is looking to open more offices and boost headcount in the Middle East, joining Wall Street peers expanding in the region to tap its deep pools of capital. JP Morgan Chase plans to add over 100 staffers to its Middle East businesses in coming years. Again, recapping, S&P right now down 18, drop there of 0.3%. Balance of power continues right now. Back we go to Washington. Once again, your host, here's Joe Matthew.
Okay, Charlie, thank you so much. Live from New York, watching Wall Street for us, the great Charlie Pellet, every day here on Balance of Power. In the throes of debate here in Washington with an extended visit to Capitol Hill today by President Trump, in the motorcade, other end of Pennsylvania Avenue, behind closed doors, with members of the House Republican Conference. If you ask the president, and we did, in the hallways outside that meeting, he said it was a meeting of love. Unheralded unity, unprecedented, he said. Reporting from inside that room suggests that there was some shouting that broke out. But the president told SALT Republicans, as we've come to call them, to back off on demands for a higher cap, trying to push this thing through a Rules Committee hearing that's set for 1 o'clock in the morning tomorrow, and maybe a floor vote later on this week. Important to note, in our second hour, about 20 minutes from right now, we're going to be talking with Congressman Brian Stile, the Republican from Wisconsin, who was in that meeting and, of course, is preparing to vote on this bill. Importantly as well, Nicole Malliotakis, another member of the from New York in this case. Yes, one of the SALT Republicans. She serves on the Ways and Means Committee and is in the throes of this debate here that we're watching unfold before our eyes. All of that is coming up in our second hour here on Balance of Power, live from Washington. Big questions about the future of Elon Musk. You know, they're talking about Doge cuts even in the middle of this debate here on how to forward tax cuts. They want to cut spending as well. Elon Musk, of course, winding down his role at the Doge, getting back to business, and fascinating back and forth today in an important interview that you saw and heard here on Bloomberg with Bloomberg's Michal Hussein, as we consider the impact that his involvement in politics has had on his business. He's spoken about this extensively, referring to attacks on Teslas, of course, the reputation damage that's been done to companies, including SpaceX as well. Let's get a taste of that interview.
One question before we move on to other companies, which is that I wonder if some of what has happened to Tesla in the last few months, did you take it personally?
Yes.
And did it make you regret any of, or think twice about your political endeavors? Because it is.
I did what needed to be done. The violent antibody reaction, and I'm not someone who's ever committed violence, and yet massive violence was committed against my companies. Massive violence was threatened against me. Who are these people? Why would they do that? How wrong can they be? They're on the wrong side of history, and that's an evil thing to do. To go and damage some poor innocent person's car, to threaten to kill me. What's wrong with these people? I've not harmed anyone. So something needs to be done about them. And a number of them are going to prison, and they deserve it. And more will.
You're referring to the attacks on Tesla showrooms, but I think
Firing bullets into showrooms and burning down cars is unacceptable. Yeah. Those people will go to prison, and the people that funded them and organized them will also go to prison. Don't worry.
But wouldn't you?
We're coming for you.
Wouldn't you? But wouldn't you acknowledge that some of the people who turned against Tesla in Europe were upset at your politics, and very few of them would have been violent in any way. They just objected to what they saw you say or do politically.
Well, it's certainly fine to object to political things, but it's not fine to resort to violence and hanging someone in effigy and death threats. That's obviously not okay. That's absurd. That is in no way justifiable at all, in any way, shape, or form. And some of the legacy media nonetheless have sought to justify it, which is unconscionable. Shame on them.
Shame on them, says Elon Musk earlier today in a live conversation on Bloomberg TV and radio. Got pretty dark there. So he talked about returning to Tesla, and that he's going to spend a lot less, quote, a lot less, unquote, in the future on politics, saying he thinks he's done enough. If I see a reason to do political spending in the future, he said, I will do it. I do not currently see a reason. Let's assemble our political panel. We've got a lot to talk about with Rick Davis and Jeannie Shea. Strategist and partner at Stone Court Capital. Rick, when you listen to the tone, when you see Elon pointing at the camera like that, he did generate a round of applause. You wonder if the popular notion that Elon broke Washington is incorrect. Did Washington break Elon?
Yeah, I would have said exactly how you articulated it. Elon came to Washington to break it, and it broke Elon. There's no question that he is less a factor today than he was 100 days ago. And it's all on him. His stewardship of the Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency is going to go down as one of the big disasters of a post-election presidential initiative. You'll notice nobody today in any of the conversations on Capitol Hill about spending cuts and reforming government even mentions the name Doge anymore. I mean, how quickly it became the kind of thing you run away from, not run to. But I do applaud him. His articulation of opposition to political violence is what everybody should be talking about. I mean, he is a victim of political violence. Just because he did what he did should not result in the destruction of property or death threats or any kind of bodily harm to him. And so I wish he would put it into that context, because I think coming from him, a Trump supporter, it would be a very, very important message to send to the American public.
What's your take, Jeannie, having listened to Elon Musk there? He was speaking at the Qatar Economic Forum in conversation with Bloomberg. Quote, I'm going to do a lot less in the future, he said, talking about political spending. I think I've done enough. What lesson has Elon Musk learned here?
First of all, shout out to Michelle Hussein, who did a fabulous job. I listened to this interview. It was fascinating. And yeah, he made some news here. I mean, he talked about the fact that he is going to cut back potentially, as you mentioned, on political spending. Of course, he has said that in the past, and he has spent a lot just in the 24 cycle. So he could very well change his mind, and he left that door open. But I think this reflects something we've heard, quite frankly, from Tesla and from others, that his political activities with other factors in the economy, like the tariffs, have impacted his businesses. And so he's going to go back and pay attention to those businesses. And this is not a surprise. This is the danger that any CEO, anybody in the C-suite who engages in political activity, this is the danger, this is the threat that they are under, that it is a consumer-facing business like Tesla. I mean, not as much companies that aren't consumer-facing, but when it's consumer-facing, this is what happens. I'm not sure what legacy media he's talking about who have justified violence. I haven't heard that from any legacy media, but of course, no violence can be justified. He is right on that. But consumers absolutely have a right to use their paychecks and to use their hard-earned money in other ways if they find what he is doing in the political realm unacceptable. And that's what's happened to Elon Musk in this case.
We talked about damage to the Tesla brand. Elon Musk pushed back on a bit. in this interview, but there's a fascinating poll out. This is an annual poll from the Harris Poll Group. They're working with Axios here in a brand reputation survey, just what people think, the associations they have with major brands, a top 100. Tesla, Rick, was in 8th place in 2021. Last year, it tumbled to 63rd. It is now near the bottom at 95th. It placed last in character, near the bottom in areas like ethics and citizenship. You know a lot about this. How do you recover a brand reputation after an expose like we saw with Elon Musk? Everyone pictures him carrying that chainsaw.
Yeah, it's really extraordinary. I mean, this was the largest single drop in rankings on the entire list of 100. He dropped down 32 positions this year alone. And as you described it, last year he dropped almost the equal amount. He'll be out of the top 100 next year if it continues on trend, which is incredible because you actually don't hear very many people complaining about the Tesla car itself. It's the leadership of the company that they are, I think, taking out on him. And by the way, the number 2 biggest drop was Adidas, associations with Yeezy, and the whole controversies around him. I mean, when you are in that same class, you've got an image problem. And my guess is it'll take him 10 years to overcome the kind of damage that he's done to his own brand. Not only Tesla, but the brand, known as Elon Musk.
That's something else, Jeannie. I don't know if you have any advice for Elon Musk, but he seems to suggest in our interview that conservatives have taken the place of liberals who have given up on his company. Is that all he needs to do?
And that's not what the numbers suggest. He can hope that has happened. There may be a little bit of that, but of course they have taken a big hit, and just this Axios brand survey shows that. And so he has some work to do on this. He also owns Twitter, of course, or X as he calls it, and he has a huge platform with which to showcase his brand. The problem is, just a few minutes ago on Bloomberg, as opposed to saying what he would probably be advised to say, which is, we will let law enforcement officials handle it, violence is never justified, he points to the camera and says, we're coming for you. You're going to be jailed. That kind of thing is not going to resurrect his brand. So he does need, to a certain extent, to be a little less forward-facing in terms of his focus with the media, and I think focus a little bit more on the companies and the work that he does so well, because he is paying the price, as our shareholders, for his political activities over the last few years.
If you were in charge of damage control here, reputation repair, if you will, at Tesla, Rick Davis, would your advice include Elon Musk being out in the media more, doing more interviews like this, or maybe having somebody else speak for the company?
I don't think you can replace Elon Musk. You came to the party with him, you're going to leave the party with him. The question is, how do you dress him up before you leave? And look, I mean, I'm not sure he's a scriptable person. He's kind of like Donald Trump in that regard. You can sort of write all the speeches and put them in the teleprompter you want, but he's going to go off script anytime he wants. And as Jeannie pointed out, he's actually making a pretty compelling argument against political violence. And then he exerts some political violence himself and sorry, we're coming from you. Look, and this idea that there's a trade, Bubba ain't driving a Tesla truck, right? I mean, that ain't going to happen. Republicans aren't going to go for that. You're not going to see those things spurting up in rural America all of a sudden. So, he needs to address it. He needs to come to grips with it. But part of what makes him such an interesting.
But something that Bloomberg is not mentioning is that many people that were buying his types of products were coming from the perspective of trying to save the planet. And they're either centrist or liberal or ultra liberal. And unfortunately, there's a big part of America that if you don't think like they do, they will demonize you. And that's what's happening with Elon Musk. And unfortunately, I watch a lot of, news and doing this show. I don't remember ever seeing Bloomberg's anchors or newscasters mention that they were condemning the burning of the Cybertrucks or the vandalizing of Tesla dealerships at all. They would cover it in the news, but they would not condemn it. And the problem with the mainstream media is that they are liberal bias. And so they are just fanning the flames by covering it. If it bleeds, it leads. And so they're covering it. They're getting the eyeballs to their channels or to their website or to their TV show. And it puts the liberal mindset into the fore, where if you don't do what we think you should do, if you go against our ideals, then we are going to harass you and we're going to cancel you. That's what the liberal media and the liberal constituency in the United States was trying to do with Elon Musk. They were trying to cancel him and hurt him financially because he associated himself with Trump. The same thing happened in the first run for president for Trump in 2016. Remember Macy's? He used to have he used to sell clothing at Macy's. All right, and they canceled the contract, if you remember, and it hurt also Ivanka. I believe Ivanka was also had a line or a series of products that were being sold at Macy's also. That if you don't agree with our type of politics, we're not going to associate with you. So they're biased. It's not about commerce. They're just biased. If you're woke, they'll sell your products. But if you're not woke, no. They're going to demonize you. If you don't follow their agenda, then they're going to riot. They're going to cause havoc, destroy property, do death threats. That's how the ultra liberals work. That's how the Democratic Party in general works. The Democratic Party is not a centrist party. It's a leftist party. And leftists act like this. And that's what I think Elon Musk was trying to say during the interview in Qatar, the Qatar Economic Forum. That you have mainstream media not stepping up and doing the right thing and condemning these actions. Not just covering it, but condemning it. And there's the problem. The mainstream media is fanning the flames of leftists. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Gladiator Barley. Gladiator Barley will help to build muscle. It's going to bring down inflammation, detoxify your body, and soak up free radicals with superoxide dismutase. It's a powder. Take a half a scoop or a full scoop every day, either for breakfast or for lunch, and do resistance training, build muscle. Stacks really well with Myotrol. Myotrol helps gene expression to build muscle. And take the Boomer Boost. Boomer Boost is the fourth pillar of my protocol. It'll rev up your metabolism, boost up your energy levels. It also helps with your cardiovascular health, brain function, and musculature. It has a very comprehensive compound profile that you can take a look at on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take it every day. Take it for breakfast or for lunch once a day. Take one big scooper, mix it with soft foods or filtered water, a smoothie, or milk. Take it every day. You're going to lose weight. You're going to have a steady level of energy throughout the whole day. You're going to be able to sleep better. You're going to be able to concentrate better. It's
It's going to get rid of brain fog. You're going to have less inflammation. You're just going to recover quicker when you work out. You're going to be able to just have more vitality. And when you do that, and you have more vitality, you're moving around more. When you're moving around more, that's beneficial for your musculature. That's beneficial for communicating with other people. So taking Boomer Boost is going to do a lot of benefits for you. So take it every day. And if you stack it with either the heirloom barley or the gladiator barley, you stack it with them together, you're going to improve also controlling your A1C levels, your blood glucose levels, which is really important. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the gladiator barley or the heirloom barley and the Boomer Boost and get healthy. In 2025, you can get a lot healthier than you are today. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the supplements that I offer and stack them the way I tell you to. Thank you for listening. This is the end of the transmission. I wish you a nice day, and stay tuned for the next show. Thank you for listening.